gentlemen, council, public listening on or watching online, welcome. We're beginning this evening with a public hearing. This is not officially a meeting of council. There will be a meeting of council following the public hearing, but there's actually a public hearing concerning 4 applications. And the process that is followed for the edification of the public, the process that's followed in public hearings, is that the people at this table sit here in a kind of a quasi-judicial capacity. They're not here to argue or question or debate. They're here to listen to the presentation, first the presentation of the application itself from the responsible planner, and then to hear, to ask any questions of clarification that council may have of the presentation made by the planner, but not to debate the merits of it, just to get clarification. And that's followed by an opportunity for the public to have input on the particular application that we are dealing with at that time. And then following the public's input, if the applicant wishes to respond or make any comment at all, the applicant is welcome also to do so. When we get to the public input portion, you'll be invited to come to the microphone at the podium that's in front of me, and I'll handle the speaker for you. If when you come, you'd simply introduce yourself and give your place of residence for the purposes of the record, that would be very useful for us. So that's the process, and I'll now call the public hearing to order for April 4th, 2023, and the first matter that we'll be dealing with is a municipal planning strategy amendment for the Greenwood Growth Center boundary expansion. Mr. Paul Deck of Upland Planning and Design Studio is joining us via Teams this evening because there were other matters occupying his people. Normally Ian Watson would be presenting. So Mr. Deck, are you with us?
Yes, that's right. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Take it away when you're ready, sir.
I would like to start with the opening presentation on the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw amendments for the Grove Center, Greenwood Grove Center boundary amendment. Next slide, please. First of all, let's get an overview of the geography of the site. So the subject site is framed to the north by Central Avenue in Greenwood, to the east by Tremont Mountain Road, and to the west essentially by the municipal boundary, with only one further property being situated between the subject site and the county line. Next slide. So the site is known as Clements Park. It used to be part of the CFB 14 wing of the Greenwood CFB base, known as Clements Park. The site contains about 140 acres. It is currently essentially unzoned, so it is not part of any designation under the future land use map, nor has it any zone. It is just on both maps earmarked as federal lands without any land use regulation implications. It is essentially the southwestern corner of the community of the village of Greenwood, and the site is currently vacant. All buildings have been removed from the site after it ceased to exist as a housing housing site of the military base. However, there's still some infrastructure on the site. Most notably, there is still one active municipal lift station. And also in the overall site, there are 2 existing schools, which are currently zoned as institutional I1. Next slide. Here are some images from the sites. On the left-hand side, you can see a picture of the municipal lift station, as well as on the right-hand side, the view from Central Avenue in Greenwood. The access roads to the former military housing site are currently barred off with jersey barriers, and the roads are grown over. Next slide. On Central Avenue, there is active transportation infrastructure available in close proximity to the site. There is specifically a sidewalk leading to the village core, and on the right-hand side you can see a photograph of one of the two schools which are located in the overall site. Next slide. So a few words on the history of the project, where this application came from. The initiative was started by the mayor in February of last year with a request to the federal government whether these lands could be divested, since they have been unused for a long time. About a month later, in March of 2022, DND, the Department of National Defense, responded that indeed they are looking into a process currently whether this site could be declared surplus, and that this will be further confirmed in an upcoming master planning process for the entire CFB Greenwood site. Further to that, in April of last year, Minister of Housing John Lohr has also added to the conversation by confirming that repurposing the site for housing purposes would be in alignment with national and provincial housing strategies, and that the minister will reach out to the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation to facilitate the process. Next slide. So the proposal that is in place for the site is the following. So the overall goal of the proposal is to prepare the planning rules for a potential divestiture of the site. And there are a couple of things that need to concurrently happen for that. So for one, on the municipal structure map, the growth center boundary would need to be adjusted. On the future land use map, the area, which is just currently marked as federal lands without any designation, would need to be designated as residential. And on the zoning map, these areas would need to be matched with the comprehensive neighborhood development R5 zone. Next slide. This is what it would look like on the respective municipal structure map. So the involved PID numbers that would be involved in that redesignation are showing here on this map. There are 5 properties in total which directly relate to the former military base, and further to that there are also 3 PID numbers in the overall site which are used by the 2 schools and the municipal lift station. Next slide. And here's the proposal of what it would look like after the rezoning and redesignation. The entire site, including the 2 schools and the lift station, would be zoned with the R5 zone. And the same area would also receive the matching residential designation and become part of the growth center. Next slide. So let us review some policies as they pertain to this proposal. So first of all, with the site currently not being designated or zoned, let us have a look at the applicable policies of the municipal planning strategy that speak to the 2 kinds of areas there are in the plan as part of the planning strategy, which are rural areas and growth centers. So rural areas are characterized as areas outside of growth centers. These areas are intended to contain primarily agricultural and resource uses and their related industries. rural commercial uses, rural industrial, recreational uses, renewable energy, and limited residential development. So that would be the characteristics of rural areas. Now on the next slide, you can see the characteristics of how growth centers are described in the municipal planning strategy. So growth centers have characteristics that differentiate them from surrounding rural areas of the municipality. These characteristics may include central sewer services, central water services, active transportation corridors, community facilities, recreation facilities, educational facilities, diverse housing options. So looking through these items that characterize growth centers, so 4 of them already apply to the overall site. So it is connected to water and sewer services, and some water and sewer services are presumably also left behind on site from the days when this was still part of the military base. Active transportation corridors connect to the site. There is active transportation connections to the schools available and the educational facilities themselves. So overall, this reads that, yeah, if one of the 2 areas designations is to be chosen, the growth center seems to be a better fit. Next slide. Further, the growth centers, there's also a policy to speaks, to how the boundaries are typically to be defined. The growth centers are intended to minimize the spread of urban development into agricultural areas and to encourage cost-effective servicing by municipal infrastructure. Which is a given here because it is the site is just at the edge of the existing serviced area of the village of Greenwood. Next slide. So there are some policies in the municipal planning strategy on the review of growth centers, and this is maybe the only policy that doesn't fully speak to supporting this redesignation and change of the growth center boundary, but there are reasons for that. So essentially, what the growth center policy says is that growth centers have to follow the boundaries according to the policies that set them for all the main urban sites within the municipality. And that growth center expansions are also to follow the predefined areas which have been established in the process to define this planning strategy and land use bylaw. However, what needs to be considered is that back then, 4 years ago, when these documents were adopted, it was just not foreseeable at that time that the Department of National Defense would actually divest that site in the near future, which is why it's understandable that back then it was not included in the areas that were earmarked for growth center expansions. The area is not agriculturally zoned, as I have previously explained. It is actually not zoned at all, which means that item C does not apply to the site. Next slide. So the zone that we're proposing to apply is the comprehensive neighborhood R5 zone. So just to quote the policy on that, the comprehensive neighborhood development R5 zone is intended for integrated and comprehensive planning of new large-scale neighborhoods by development agreement. This zone is appropriate for locations that are environmentally sensitive or prominently located within an established community or where an innovative development form is desirable. So this sounds like a very good description of the potential site for housing development. I would also like to highlight that by using the comprehensive neighborhood development R5 zone, the municipality essentially creates a framework for future development without predetermining anything. So by using the development agreement instrument for any development that happens in the R5 zone, Council is in full control of what kind of development proposals may be brought forward for the site. It will, yeah, there are policies that speak to many items that need to be verified when a development proposal comes forward through this policy, such as water services, infrastructure, overall design of the site, how it will be embedded in the overall village. So that is still all to be determined through the development agreement process. The R5 zone just sets the framework for that. Next slide. And here are a couple of items from the neighborhood, comprehensive neighborhood policies. So lands that are zoned R5 are intended to enable the development of large-scale and comprehensively planned neighborhood. It may apply to areas that are minimum 5 acres in size, which applies in this case, would benefit from a public planning process and need to be well integrated with the surrounding lands, as it is the case because they're essentially situated within the village of Greenwood. Next slide. One more item that needs to be verified before the planning team can recommend an amendment of the municipal planning strategy to council is the level of compliance with statement of provincial interest, which are part of the Municipal Government Act. So there are 5 statements of provincial interest in total, with the statements related to drinking water and flood risk area not really being applicable to the site. The interesting ones are the ones on promotion of the agriculture industry, good usage of infrastructure, efficient usage of infrastructure, and the provision of a diverse supply of housing options. So these 3 statements of provincial interest. The one on agriculture, most of the site is situated in a class 4, on a class 4 agricultural soils. So as long as those are not actively farmed, they're not considered as protected by the statements of provincial interest. There is a small section of the site which is in on class 3 soils, but it is relatively minor and it is to be determined through the development agreement process whether that area would actually be developed. So overall, since much of the area has grown over and hasn't been used for agricultural purposes in the past, there is limited potential for agricultural development as a whole. In terms of efficient use of infrastructure, the site is immediately adjacent to serviced areas, and presumably there are still some services in the ground. A municipal lift station is available on site as well, an active one. So redesignating and rezoning this area would help the municipality to make efficient use of infrastructure. And of course, the supply of a diverse mix of housing, that is pretty much the declared goal of redesignating that site. So that is also in support of the statement of provincial interest. So reviewing these 3 statements of provincial interest, overall there is a picture that the proposed amendments are supported by provincial policy. Next slide. And that concludes the presentation. Just a quick look on where we are in the amendment process. The process was initiated last year. There was a review by Planning Advisory Committee in October of last year, followed by a public participation meeting at the end of November. Planning Advisory Committee recommended to go ahead with the amendments in February of this year. And the first reading on the file happened on the 7th of March last month. So right now we are at the public hearing, to be followed later by the second reading on council agenda tonight.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Deck. If you'd stay with us for a moment, there may be questions of clarification from members of council. Just looking up and down the table at the moment, Councillor Windsor has a question.
Thank you, and I'm not clear on how this factors in, but would we anticipate this land being sold to the public, or was the request for this to be transferred or sold to the county? When
I can answer that.
Yeah.
The first of all, senior levels of government reached out and said to, well, all three levels of government to look around, do an inventory of available properties that the government in question itself might own, that would be available for housing because of the housing emergency that is currently facing us all in the province, or in the nation for that matter. And then, of course, the municipality of Kings does not hold any large tracts of land, so they weren't available. What we did, we were reminded and did identify that Clements Park had once been a full subdivision, or there had been a full subdivision there with the school, 2 schools and the community, and therefore we, following the request, we reached out to DND, as Mr. Deck has indicated, and said, we're aware of the park, is it available? And if so, what's your process? And their response was, well, our process is we have to declare it surplus. That's a lengthy process for DND. And if they were to declare it surplus, it would be first offered to other governments than the municipality, and perhaps to First Nations. Or they may decide to keep it themselves, and because they have, as has been stated, they have a transition going on at the base at the present time. They have some 300 new folks coming on board. So we have no idea whether or not it would be available, but we felt an obligation to make the ask. And those are the answers that we have received to date. And if it is to be declared surplus, and if it is to find its way out of DND's hands, then this municipality thought that it would be opportune for us to include it within the boundaries of the area that is considered to be the growth center, because we have services going right to the doorstep, and they used to, and there are older services within the ground. We don't know what the state of those services are, but we would hope that it would be private enterprise that would develop the property.
And relatedly, you referred to the infrastructure in the ground. And I agreed with the ask, by the way, totally, as we try and deal with the housing. If we didn't include it in the growth center and it wasn't going to be developed, and I'm not clear if it would have to be included in the growth center for the military, for D&D to develop. Perhaps there can be some clarity on that. But if it was, let's say, not included at all and not developed at all, would someone be responsible for the infrastructure in the ground to remove it? And if so, would that be
It would have to be certainly examined.
Right.
The cameras would have to be put down into the pipes to see what the status of the infrastructure in the ground was, and if it's not satisfactory, it would have to be removed and replaced. To the earlier part of your question, again, this is just by way of clarification. To the earlier part of your question, as I said, they don't have to declare it surplus at all. This municipality has no authority whatsoever over federal lands or D&D lands, and if they chose to develop it, they could develop it in any fashion they wished if they are not declaring it surplus and disposing of it.
regardless of the zoning?
Regardless of the zoning. We have no right to
Right.
encumber.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to
Federal
clarify. If they
property.
want to do something with it, they can, whether we...
That's correct.
Thank you, I wanted to clarify that. And just one further clarification. If we make it comprehensive, and we've done that a little bit lately, are we limiting in some way our smaller time local developers in participating in our housing industry?
Well, that then is not a question for me. That would be a question for Mr. Deck. Mr. Deck, can you respond to that question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That depends on how the development agreement would be set up. There is, for instance, an opportunity to set it up in phases, which would mean that the overall site would be developed in small chunks, which would then possibly be more suitable for smaller developers.
Does that respond, Councillor?
Well, I'm not sure, because if there's one developer that owns, let's say, gets the property, it may be that he develops it all, and he's in that business as well, or it may be that he does go to the market to find the locals. So I'm not exactly sure how that would work out, but I guess that's as good as answer
Yes.
as he can give.
Thank you. Any other questions of clarification of the presenter by councillors? I see none. Does anyone from the public wish to comment on this application? Yes, sir. If you come to the mic and just identify yourself for the purposes of the record.
Hello, I'm Michael Giroux. I'm one of the property owners that's within 500 meters of the property. I'm right on Tremont Mountain Road.
What would your address be, sir?
It's 850 Tremont Mountain Road.
Okay, thank
My
you.
living room window looks right out into the said property.
All right.
Currently, I know it's unofficially, the property is being used as a park. There's, depending on the day of the week, there's 200 to 300 people that walk the park. Kind of thing, because it's the only park left in the area where people can walk and not be afraid of being run over by an ATV or run into groups of teenagers, drunk teenagers, kind of thing that you see in a lot of the other parks in the area. And I also, other concern, if they do use it for development, have they looked into the volume of doctors in the area? Because right now, for the people who live there, it's 7 to 8 years wait list to get a doctor. I'm on the list now for a little over 4 years, so is my wife. And child daycare. There's a large number of people in the area that do not have access to child daycare. So if you're going to develop this property and bring more people in, what are we going to do about this? I know it's outside of your privy, but I'd like to see this considered before developing this property.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions of this gentleman? No? Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Does anyone else wish to speak to the application? Yes.
Hi, my name is Sylvia. I actually I live in Terra Nova Drive, which is right on Mount Tremont, so very close to you, probably.
And your street number would be?
My street is Terra Nova Drive, 29 Terra Nova Drive in Greenwood, so right off Mount Tremont.
Okay,
Right,
thank
so
you.
right, like,
Yeah.
my kid also goes to one of those schools, and the school uses them for activities like cross-country, trails. I'm very nervous about development in that area, and the school is as well, because I'm part of their committee. It's like, what is it going to be used for? What kind of housing are you going to have there? Is it single? Is it multi? Like, I'm thinking about traffic for small communities. Like, these are 2 elementary schools with small kids who walk to school. So is it going to be urban? I want to know what kind of housing you're actually putting. Are you going to put a park? Are you going to supplement that? Or is it just going to be housing and destroy all the trees? We don't have a lot of parks, like the gentleman said. Don't have a lot of parks in the area. There's not a lot of greenery in the area. And what I like about Terra Nova Drive is that it's quiet and calm, and we have a park and 2 schools nearby. So if you're going to change things, I need to know what. And that's my concern.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Hi, Scott Bishop. I think you answered it, but I just want to make sure. What is the county? Are they hoping that it's going to be private development, or are you hoping that the provincial government's going to come in and do public housing? What's the end results you'd like to see?
We have, what we hope and what may happen could be two different things. The only way we can control our hope is to put an A5 designation on it, which then we control the type of development by a development agreement.
Right.
And we wouldn't, until such time as we receive a proposal, we not knowing yet what would be proposed, then we have no answer to your question.
So the county doesn't have any, normally you have a look at the end, you know, you want something at the end. What is the end results? Do you want private or public is the only thing do you want public like the provincial government coming in and doing their housing, or are you looking for private developers to come in? What's your hopes for it?
Our senior governments are beyond our reach.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But if it comes to the county,
Yes.
are they looking for public housing paid by the provincial government, or are they looking for private developers?
By and large, each time a development of any size takes place, the funding that is sought, part of the funding that is sought by the developer also includes funding from CMC or the provincial government. It's approximately $50,000 a unit for every low.
And there's stuff out there with CMHC. No, I
Yes.
understand. You answered
That
my
type of thing, that's kind of beyond our control. That's a rent issue.
No, I meant owned by the provincial government totally, or are you looking for private developers that work with CMHC and stuff like that? Public housing is public housing. CMHC and affordable housing, that's done by private developers. I'm just wondering, is the county's hope to have the provincial government come in and do a bunch of housing, or for someone private or a bunch of private developers come in and do whatever type of housing that the county wants?
The county's only purpose was to comply with the request to identify available land for housing, as requested by senior levels of government. But in doing that, we have said, well, in advance, we're going to put an A5 zone there, which means that anybody who develops the property would have to come to the municipality and request a development agreement.
Yep.
And at that time, we would negotiate with them through our planners what type of development takes place, how much, if any, recreation area would be involved, what connection to other existing amenities there would be, what the road structure would be, what the pedestrian activity, sidewalks would be, that type of thing.
I appreciate your answer.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments from the public? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I have two lights on from councillors, but please come up, Mr. Jameson, but if you wouldn't mind, I'll just let the councillors in. Councillor Windsor?
Yeah, my question, maybe I was a bit slow, my apologies to the lady, the previous speaker, and maybe to the speaker before. There was reference to camping, there's reference to the area being used as parking. Is there any official, and my question to one or both was, is there some official use that's happening there, or it's just?
No, I think the presenter said it was informal.
It was informal?
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. I just wanted to offer a clarification. You keep saying A5, probably because we have Grand Prix on the brain, but I think you mean C5, which is the Comprehensive Community Development Zone. I just wanted, in case people go and look up A5, they might be confused about why we would be zoning Greenwood to be the hamlet of Grand Prix.
That's why you hold that job. Yeah. Yes, Ms. Mosier.
sorry, and through you, it's actually R5, not C5.
A5, C5, R5.
I mean, they're all zones in the land use bylaw, but they're not the zone we're discussing at this moment.
All right, but perhaps you'd give a description of R5 for the purposes of the gathered group, since we've confused everybody.
Certainly. So the R5 zone is the comprehensive neighborhood development zone. It is a zone that is only, that enables development only through development agreement. And it promotes a mix of residential uses along with potentially other supportive uses such as community uses and neighborhood commercial.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't that far off the mark, but I'm sorry, you're not finished.
No, I was. I'm sorry. I was turning my mic off at the same time you were.
All right. Back to you, Mr. Jameson.
Good evening, Derek Jameson. I actually live in Berwick, but I have property directly across from the subject properties that you have here. It's on Tremont Mountain Road, and it's PID number 5530931. I guess my concerns rest with we have only recently created the boundaries for the growth center. That was less than, I believe, 4 years ago is what I'd heard and understood. And it seems to be a little premature to be looking at additional expansion of that boundaries, given that the previous consultations took almost 8 years to put in place. I think that it questions whether or not we will have sufficient resources within that area to cover not only the existing area that's in the growth center, but the additional Clements Park area. The other concern that I have, I think, from a federal government standpoint, I've watched over the years the development of the Shannon Park, the transition that has occurred in Shannon Park, and I can appreciate that you were asked to go out and find land for housing. That takes considerable time. Normally, when you're looking to the DND process, until they declare that it's surplus, it's hard to do. It's almost impossible to do anything with it because it can go in many, many different directions, and it may never occur, is the other thing. You are looking at putting about 140 acres into the growth center. From my best estimate, there's somewhere between 400 and 500 acres of land that is currently zoned residential, and that could be available for development. And I can recheck my figures, but that's what I keep coming up with. Do we not already have an adequate amount of land in that area to cover the future needs? I know of 30 lots that are just down, at least 30 lots that are just down the road from my property on the just east of the subject property here, and those are expanding or growing at about, I've seen 2 lots built in the past, 2 houses built in the past year. So the growth does not seem to be there. There is, I've even looked at doing some growth on my existing land, and I keep going through the studies, and I do not see the expansions that are needed and the numbers at this point for further growth. And I know that there is additional land on the east side of town that has, which is considerable. The other concern I have is the water resources, and the water resources that are in the existing residential development and the current growth that may occur. What are the water and sewer resources? And you brought up quality on this subject property. I will trust that there will be engineers assigned to that should anything ever come of that. And do we know if there are any other environmental issues that may be assigned to that? The only other point that I would like to say is that yes, that the upper part or the more northerly part of that land has been used for recreational purposes and the enjoyment of the environment. The former PMQs only covered a portion of all of that land, and I do see a lot of people using that upper portion of that land for recreational purposes, be it informal or formal. So, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Any questions of Mr. Jameson from any councillor? Any question of clarification? Pretty clear. Thank you, Mr. Jameson. Is there anyone else who wishes to present on this particular application? Anybody else? Okay, then Mr. Deck, did you have anything further?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think maybe the one point that I would like to emphasize is that the development agreement process essentially means that anything to be developed on the side has to go once more through the steps which are showing on this slide here, right? So any development agreement would go back to Planning Advisory Committee and back to Council, and there would be another public hearing on the matter as well as public participation meetings. So yeah, we're just laying the administrative foundation through the R5 zone, but the actual development would go then again through the whole public process. So there will be lots of opportunity for public input.
Thank you, sir. Anything arising from that? If not, then I would declare the public hearing with respect to the Greenwood Growth Center boundary expansion to be closed. And we'll be moving on now to a public hearing regarding an application to rezone a portion of property on Highway 201 in Greenwood. And who will be presenting with respect to that? Ms. Moser, you?
No, Mark Fredericks is here remotely. So I'll advance the slides just like the last one, but Mark will be presenting.
All right. Mr. Fredericks, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, sir. You take it away.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, and I appreciate the flexibility to do this virtually. I'm not feeling well today, and but glad to have the opportunity to review this planning application. This is a rezoning application, also in Greenwood. This is on the other side of Greenwood than what we were just looking at. So this is on the east side of Greenwood, up against the growth center boundary. So this is within the growth center. There's a large vacant property here, and the applicants, or the current owners, have applied to rezone that from the R2 residential 1 and 2 unit zone to the R3 or residential mixed density zone. And I would acknowledge the applicants are Mary D'Entremont and Brian Jack Morris. Next slide. So Mary D'Entremont, again, has applied to rezone this from the R2 to the R3 zone. The intent of the R3 zone would be to permit the development of grouped dwellings. The R2 zone does not permit this form of development. The density requirements are very similar between these two zones, but the available format of housing is slightly different in the R3 zone. And they are looking to do grouped dwellings where there's be a shared common driveway and shared land infrastructure. Next slide. So the applicants purchased this in early 2022. It's forested, it's essentially a vacant property. It's about 27 acres in size, so it's quite large. And it does have road access on Highway 201, as well as road access, or potential access on Spinney Street and Dakota Lane. So the property itself has road frontage on Highway 201. That's where the main access is proposed, and that is a designated collector road. And there are nearby services, including Central Sewer and Water, King's Transit as well. And there's a large commercial development not far from here, certainly within walking distance to the Greenwood Mall, and all the associated commercial enterprises in that area are just around the corner. So through the process of this planning application, though, a large wetland was identified on this property through a wetland delineator that the applicant hired. And that area has been removed from the rezoning. So this is not we're not seeking a rezoning of the entire property, but only a portion of this property. Next slide. And that's shown here. You can sort of see this, the subject property is outlined in red. The area that we're considering rezoning is is shown in yellow, which is the color of the R3 or residential mixed density zone. So you can see the back portion, the back corner where it abuts the other. Oh.
We've lost your sound.
Sorry about that. I had a
Okay.
smoke alarm going off, but
Oh, carry on.
Very, okay, so yeah, we're looking at this this property, and the front portion is where we're looking at rezoning, this front yellow area. The back portion would remain in the R2 zone, and there is the ability through the Nova Scotia Environment Department to essentially fill in wetlands, and through a compensation program where a new wetland is developed somewhere in the vicinity, somewhere in the area, ideally. So that ability is there. I'm not sure the applicants are interested in pursuing that at this time. They're looking at a couple of phases in this front portion, but the ability is still there to potentially fill in some portions of that wetland. And so that's why we thought it was appropriate to leave in the R2 residential 1 and 2 unit zone. But you can also see from this map the variety and diversity of the area, including the Greenwood Mall and commercial development along Central Avenue. Next slide. We did reach out to the public with this. We sent letters to property owners within 500 feet, which reached a number of people in advance of the public information meeting. We heard a variety of concerns from the neighborhood to the west between this property and the Greenwood Mall property. No real concerns with the proposed development, but certainly we heard requests to extend sidewalks, some sewer extent issues that we talked about, and also developing parkland spaces. So there were certainly some requests from the neighborhood that if there was going to be additional population added to this neighborhood, that some of the parkland that the municipality owns, in fact, could potentially be developed. Some additional sidewalks would be desirable. There is a fair amount of traffic that comes through here. But generally, no one was opposed to the proposed rezoning of this property. Next slide. So the enabling policy in the municipal planning strategy allows council to consider rezoning any of the zoning maps from one zone to another zone within the same designation. And because in this case we're talking about a residential property within the R2 zone, it can be considered to be rezoned to any other residential zone. In this case, the request is from R2 to R3, and that is enabled through this policy here. Next slide. So in considering these kind of rezoning processes, we look to see that the applicable zone placement policies are being met. So those discuss where the specific zone would be located. For example, the R3 zone is intended to locate within growth centers along major collector roads in areas where a mix of development could occur and provide some walkability. And so the zone placement policies here are quite consistent with this location. We also look at the impact of the specific proposed development and any other potential uses that are permitted within that zone. In this case, we're really talking about residential forms of development, so these were all very consistent with what's permitted there under the current zoning. And then we also review the general amendment criteria, which is in the next slide. And these look to see, is this generally in keeping with the intent of the planning strategy? And certainly this is an example of infill development, making use of existing land within a growth center. No expansions needed here. This is vacant land within the boundary. It's quite close to services, including commercial and community facilities. There's very little financial impact on the municipality. There may be some cost sharing with the municipality on sewer and water extensions, although there is the ability to connect via Spinney Street. We also looked at land use compatibility, and again, residential development in the area, it would be relatively compatible with what's proposed. We look at impact on well fields, and these there is actually the Greenwood water utility does have well field boundaries that do cover a close proximity, but this property is not within any of those boundaries. And the proposed use as a residential development is not a prohibited use within those well fields. So that was satisfactory as well. And we looked at the site suitability as well. This is another general criteria that we always look at. And in this case, this is what led us to revising the boundary of the rezoning, because we did identify this large wetland. The applicant identified that through their wetland delineator, and it was determined that that was, area that not really suitable for the R3 zone. And so that's where we revised that boundary. Next slide. That boundary is shown here, again, just to show that the front portion is proposed to go to the R3 zone, and the back portion would remain in the current R2 zoning. Next slide. This shows the process. We're at the public hearing stage, received first reading on March 7th, and is scheduled to have second reading by council later this evening. And we haven't received any written submissions. The properties within 500 feet were notified again of this public hearing, and the public hearing was advertised in the local newspaper, and all the statutory requirements have been met. And let's see, next slide. So with that, I think I would pass it back to the mayor for any potential questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fredericks. Are there any questions by any councillor of Mr. Fredericks by way of clarification? I see none. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this application? Yes, sir. I'm sorry, let me get your light there, and if you wouldn't mind giving your name and address, please.
It's Arthur Backman. Civic address for the valley would be 169 Hall Road, but I am a lot owner adjoining this property. That would be, I bordered on my east, and I'm on the Hall Road, so it borders my east and my north boundary. I'm totally in support of it for a lot of reasons. One is, from the municipality's point of view, it allows affordable housing. It allows them to be close together in groups, which means you're not using any more land than you have to, and your services, your roads, are going to be private. I'm a big supporter of private roads because the municipality doesn't have to worry about them, and you're not going to have people complain and there's a pothole because the landowners are responsible to do that. So it's a win for the municipality to have affordable housing, not pick up a lot of expense, not have the responsibility for the roads. Probably services of garbage collection and stuff like that would have to be sorted out, and the sewer put, but it's close. It's right. It was designed to be expanded for a subdivision, so the services are close as far as water and sewer to hook on. The only downside I see in the whole thing is why it takes so long to get something like this done. It's been 1.5 years, and it's now into the point to have it rezoned, but why does it take 1.5 years? It should not take that long. So I'm all for it. I just think it should have happened sooner. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Does anyone else wish to have input? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Jill Neville, and I live at 1155 Highway 201. My main concern right now is I've lived in my home for 36 years, and I still don't have water and sewer, and I'm in the village of Greenwood, so I'm hoping to be able to be hooked up to the water or sewer when the development takes place. Also, I was a little concerned about what this might do to my property value, as in what type of housing might end up being in the subdivision. Are my taxes going to be affected? Obviously, if I get water and sewer, I know that. Also, I have a daughter that has visual issues, and a sidewalk would definitely be a huge help to us as a family on that road. It's tremendously busy there. And I was wondering also if there was an environmental study done prior to the proposal? And if there was one, are we able to have access to it, to know how it turned out? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am, for your comments. Mr. Fredericks, would you like to address both the comments regarding roads, private or public, and the issue of the environmental study that was just raised?
Yeah, certainly. There wasn't an environmental assessment carried out here. There was a privately engaged wetland delineator to establish where the wet areas are on this property. In terms of the roads, I think the previous speaker is absolutely correct in that there are pros and cons with road ownership and maintenance. And enabling development like this is in a grouped dwelling format where the roads are shared communally and owned by a private individual, that does have the potential to save the municipality money on regular maintenance and long-term ownership.
Okay, sir, thank you. Any questions of clarification by any member of council? Is there any other member of the public who wishes to speak to this application? Are the applicants here? Do they wish to speak? No? Okay, well, thank you for your input. As I said, the purpose of the people in front of you sitting here is to hear and absorb all of the input with respect to each application before a decision has to be made ultimately by council in public session. Thank you for your input. On this particular hearing, I'll declare the hearing adjourned. And we're moving on to item C, a public hearing regarding an application to enter into a development agreement at 7096 Highway Number 1 in Coldbrook. And Ms. Katie Ullman from our planning department is going to present on that. Ms. Ullman, when you're ready, please. I'll get your mic. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a development agreement. Cody Holland of 7096 Highway 1 in Coldbrook submitted an application for a development agreement to be able to permit building and construction contractor use and manufacturing use for the construction of tiny homes on his property. So this is an approximate location of the subject property. And this is the subject property. As you can see, it's located along Highway 1, which is the main transportation corridor. There's approximately 125 feet of road frontage, and the property is about 2.73 acres. This photo shows that the property had a lot of vegetation on it, which has since been cleared. The property is surrounded by different businesses, including a computer store, thrift store, auto sales, winemaking, and a restaurant. So this is the zoning map. As you can see right now, it is within the C3 mixed commercial residential zone. This zone does not permit manufacturing. But the zone right beside it, which is the C1, which is general commercial, does. To the lands to the south of this property are zoned for residential mixed density. And across the highway, there's mixed commercial residential. So building and construction use and manufacturing are permitted on the property directly adjacent to this property. But they are not currently allowed on this property. So the reason that we're doing the development agreement as opposed to a rezoning is so we can limit where the manufacturing happens on the property to mitigate any future issues in terms of land use conflict, because the properties behind are zoned for residential mixed density. So as you can see, within the future land use designation, it is within the commercial designation. So building and construction uses in manufacturing are both permitted within the commercial designation. So this is the site plan of the proposal. So this is where Highway 1 would be at the top of the diagram. This is the existing house and garage. In the center here, he's left some vegetation, and at the back here is where a proposed workshop would go. And it says that the workshop will be 5,000 square feet, but we are limiting the size of manufacturing to 2,500 square feet. So this is the style of building that the applicant would like to use on the property. And then the second photo shows the front of the property and Highway 1. These both are pictures of what the property looks like now and the proposed location of the building. So for enabling policies, use is considered by development agreement. Use is compatible with the purpose of mixed commercial residential, the C3 zone, that do not otherwise meet the requirements of the zone in accordance with policy 3.2.9 of the municipal planning strategy. So as I've previously stated, the subject property is within the commercial designation, and it is staff's opinion that the purpose of the mixed commercial residential zone outlined in the previous section can be maintained by permitting the building and construction contractors and manufacturing uses. The adjacent property located to the east of the property is currently zoned general commercial, as I stated, and permits these uses already. So the use of a development agreement, like I stated, will be able to control where this happens on the site, which will mitigate any potential land use conflicts in the future. So 3.2.9, council shall consider only by development agreement in all commercial zones proposals for commercial, industrial, mixed use, and residential developments that are not otherwise permitted and cannot meet applicable commercial zone standards. The conditions that prevent the proposal from being permitted as of right in the designation is addressed by the development agreement, including but not limited to enhanced buffering and positioning and design of building and structures. So for commercial designation, the goal of the commercial designation is to identify lands where commercial activities are promoted and prioritized over other land uses. For the transportation objective, to direct commercial centers to main transportation corridors, and economic development objective to promote and encourage entrepreneurship and innovation. So for the mixed commercial residential zone purpose, the purpose of this zone is to complement established commercial areas and provide the flexibility to permit both residential and lower impact commercial uses, such as local retail or business offices in the same area of growth centers, in accordance with policy 3.2.2C of the municipal planning strategy. So the property contains an existing dwelling which serves as the applicant's primary residence, and an existing garage that the applicant uses for the storage. So the rear southern portion of the property, which is approximately 80%, was treed, but as I stated previously, it has since been cleared, and the applicant stores his equipment for his landscaping business in this location. So for policy review, the proposal is consistent with the intent of the municipal planning strategy, goals, objectives, and policies contained within. The proposal does not involve any development costs to the municipality. The Provincial Department of Public Works has no concerns with regard to road network circulation, access to or from the subject property, or traffic generated by the proposal. The Kentville Fire Chief has advised that there is adequate fire protection services and central sewer is available. In Zone D of the Kentville Wellfield, manufacturing is permitted, and this proposal does not create any land use conflicts. So in terms of general criteria, it is suitable. So the purpose of a development agreement is to enable uses, so this would enable manufacturing use and the building and construction contractor's use. It controls the location of these uses on the property, and it will regulate the outdoor commercial display. So this is where we are. We are at the public hearing. A public information meeting was held on April 27th. 2022, and an associate presentation has been available on the municipal website since this time. 26 property owners within 500 feet of the subject property were notified of the public information meeting. 6 people were present at the public information meeting and no comments were received. Since then, we've received 2 comments from the public, one for general information and one about the current upkeep of the property. Council gave initial consideration February 14th, 2023, and then for this public hearing, 26 property owners, again, within 500 feet of the subject property, were notified, and an ad was placed in the local newspaper for 2 consecutive weeks.
Thank you, Ms. Ullman. Are any questions of clarification by any councillor for Ms. Ullman on the presentation? Councillor Windsor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Katie. I wonder, would you be able to put up the zoning chart that was right at the front end, close to the front end? Yeah, that one. So, does that mean if we zone that we have a little piece of C3, is it, the green there, that would be orphaned, sort of, as a residential?
I think the councillor is referring to the northeast corner that's not within the red lines of the subject property.
Exactly.
This, through you, Mr. Mayor, this. Okay, so that small portion of green, which is the mixed commercial residential, is not part of this subject property. So that is its own lot. And we're not rezoning the property. We're just looking to do a development agreement and keep it mixed commercial residential.
C3?
Yes.
Okay, so then the owner of this, is this piece of land currently developed? Is there property on it?
There is, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions of clarification? Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could you go back to the pictures, the photos? The next one? There's houses back behind those trees, correct? That are on, what is it, Lockhart Mountain Road, or?
Not through these photos. These are facing the rear of the property.
Oh, okay. Maybe it was when it came through PAC?
PAC.
Yeah. Okay. It's not there, so thank you.
Okay, thank you, councillor. Any further questions of clarification? Seeing none, anybody from the public wish to comment on this application? Any public comment? Do the applicants wish to comment? No? Then that was quick, Ms. Ullman. Thank you for that presentation, and I declare the public hearing with respect to that application to be closed. And we'll move on to item D, which is an application to amend the text of the land use bylaw in the historic hamlet of Grand Pre, which is an A5 zone. And Ms. Ullman, that's also yours, I believe. I'm sorry, Councillor Allen. Yes.
Thank you,
You had
Mayor. I'd
indicated
like to-
previously that you wish to exclude yourself from this
Yes.
portion of the
Okay.
deliberation.
It's
so
a conflict of interest, so
Yes.
I'll just leave my chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry I neglected to call upon you first before I brought this forward. Ms. Ullman, when you're ready. I'm sorry I didn't have your light on.
Thank you,
And
Mr. Mayor.
It's still early, too. Yeah.
Thank you. So as Mr. Mayor said, this is a land use bylaw text amendment to add farm supportive uses within the historic hamlet of Grand Pré, the A5 zone. So the subject property that triggered this application is 11611 Highway 1 in Grand Pré. Jason Lynch, on behalf of Grand Pré Wines, has submitted an application to amend the text to allow farm supportive uses within the historic hamlet of Grand Pré. So for clarification, farm supportive use means the use of a lot or buildings on that lot for uses such as, but not limited to, agricultural warehousing, processing, sorting, grading, packaging, offices, and transport facilities located on farm property and associated with farming business. This use would only be permitted on farm properties, and this use is to support and grow local farming businesses within the community. The only other mechanism to allow for farm supportive uses would be for a municipal planning strategy amendment. There is no ability to do a development agreement for farm supportive uses within the historic hamlet of Grand Pré. So this is an approximate location of the subject property. And this is the subject property that triggered the application for the text amendment. Again, this is showing the zoning and subject property, and as you can see that the historic hamlet of Grand Pré is surrounded by the agricultural zoning. The historic hamlet of Grand Pré also sits within the agricultural designation on the future land use map. The text amendment is appropriate with regards to the future land use map because the designation is agriculture and farm supportive use is a supportive use to farming operations. So this is a map of Grand Pré. So just for clarification, the red outline, within that red outline, that is the historic hamlet of Grand Pré A5 zone. So the text amendment would include the entire zone, but only properties that are farms could utilize the farm supportive use. So we have properties along Old Post Road. So this is Old Post Road, and you can see some of these properties are quite long. So only the front portion of these properties where the residential dwelling is actually within the A5 zone. The remainder of the lots is within the agricultural zone, which means that right now, as of right, these properties that are on the outside of this little zone can do farm supportive uses. So all the lands bordering the historic hamlet of Grand Pré, including lands designated as UNESCO, are zoned agricultural, and agricultural does already support farm supportive uses. For enabling policy, Council shall amend the text of land use bylaw provided the proposal meets the general criteria for amending the land use bylaw set out in section 5.3 development agreements and amending the land use bylaw. So for the Grand Pré secondary plan, in terms of agriculture, the goal is to sustain the agricultural community within its rural setting, and the objectives are to encourage the agricultural industry and appropriate related businesses. The vision statement for the historic hamlet of Grand Pré indicates a priority for sustaining a healthy rural setting by conserving the culture, environment, and agricultural landscape. This text amendment encourages the agricultural industry within the hamlet of Grand Pré. So for the secondary plan in terms of agriculture, 4.6.9, Council shall recognize the importance of existing agricultural policies in preserving agricultural land for agricultural use while reducing the potential for land use conflicts by establishing controls on non-farm uses. And 4.6.11, provide more stringent lot requirements within the agricultural designation in Grand Pré and area to preserve a density consistent with the rural character of the area. So adding farm supportive uses to the list of permitted uses is in keeping with the intent of the Grand Pré secondary plan, recognizing that agricultural land should be used for agricultural uses. For the Grand Pré secondary plan business, the goal is to foster and sustain a business community that complements the rural setting and meets the needs of visitors and the local community. The secondary plan states that council shall encourage commercial development that is small in scale and promotes a pedestrian-friendly environment. The historic hamlet of Grand Pré is a well-known tourist destination. Small-scale commercial activity within the historic hamlet has been identified as something that should be permitted within the area. The municipal planning strategy identifies the goals for business for the historic hamlet of Grand Pré, as I've pointed out. This text amendment will allow farming businesses to grow and have storage and production on site instead of having to find different facilities throughout the county, or farmers having to remove part of their farmed agricultural land in order to grow and expand their businesses. Agriculture not only contributes to the local economy, but also serves as a visitor attraction. Local businesses have capitalized on visitor traffic, and a robust visitor-oriented economy continues to develop with wineries, a motel, a bed and breakfast, a coffee roaster and shop, and other agritourism activities. So this is the Grand Pré Heritage Conservation District. For clarification, property owners had the opportunity to opt into the Heritage Conservation District. So only the properties that are highlighted in gray chose to opt into this Heritage Conservation District. In Section 4.2 of the Grand Pré Heritage Conservation District Plan, criteria for inclusion, council shall only include those properties for which the owners have signed declarations which state that said owners agreed to be included in the Heritage Conservation District. So as you can see, the subject property that triggered this application is not within the Grand Pré Heritage Conservation District. The property that triggered this application is not within the district, and a Heritage Conservation District is not a mechanism to freeze a place in time. It's a tool for a mindful way of progressing the community forward. So for the policy review, for the general criteria, the proposal is consistent with the municipal planning strategy and Grand Pré and area secondary plan. There are no costs to the municipality and no land use conflicts. The proposal is consistent with retaining rural character of the area and promoting and encouraging agriculture. So this is where we are. We are at the public hearing. A municipal planner conducted a site visit on November 9th and met with the applicant, 2022, and met with the applicant to discuss the proposal, and no concerns were raised. Public information meeting notices were sent out to 15 property owners within 500 feet of the property that triggered this application, and an ad was placed in the local newspaper. The public information meeting was held in Municipal Chambers, December 7th, 2022, in which there were 8 people in attendance. 4 of these people asked questions. The public information meeting presentation was recorded and was placed on the municipal website and continues to be available for viewing and comment. With regards to community engagement, the Municipal Government Act requires that we hold a public hearing and advertise this meeting in a local newspaper on 2 consecutive weeks. We have exceeded the expectations of engagement with regards to the Municipal Government Act by holding a public information meeting and providing online engagement opportunities. A main concern raised by residents was the existing drainage issue along Grand Prairie Road, which is out of the scope of this planning application and under the jurisdiction of the Department of Public Works. Calls were received asking for clarification about farm supportive uses. Questions were also received about the application and clarifications on why this was not being done, why this was being done as a text amendment and not through as a development agreement. And it was explained on multiple occasions that there is no mechanism through policy to do this as a development agreement. The only other alternative would be a municipal planning strategy amendment. We also received questions about the UNESCO site and implications, and it was explained that the surrounding agricultural zone that is also within UNESCO already permits farm supportive uses. We also received calls from people that had been misinformed about the application, including residents that were generally quite afraid that this would completely industrialize Grand Prairie. I want to encourage residents to always reach out for clarification if something they have heard or been told doesn't make sense or worries them. Council gave this application first reading January 14th, 2023. Public hearing notices were sent out to 15 property owners within 500 feet of this property that triggered the application, and an ad was placed in the local newspaper for 2 consecutive weeks. So we're at the public hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Ullman. Questions of clarification by councillors of Ms. Ullman on her presentation. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I just some clarification on, okay, so there's no mechanism for a development agreement, but you would need to do an MPS amendment to allow a development agreement before a development agreement could be created. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
Through you, Mayor, to Deputy Mayor. There would need to be a municipal planning strategy amendment to allow farm supportive uses to be added. Sorry, to set up a policy to be able to even do a development agreement for this use.
So there's currently no option for a development agreement, but with an MPS amendment, a policy could be created to allow a development agreement to allow farm supported uses within the A5 zone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Windsor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. And I know that things are complex in Grand Prairie with the UNESCO designation, then our zoning, and then Grand Prairie Heritage Conservation District. And we know the people out there really value the unique characteristics, the designation, and all those things in their area. I just wanted clarification as to whether what we're doing conflicts in any way with the UNESCO Heritage designation for Grand Prairie.
Ms. Ullman?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Winsler. So if you can see on this map where the hatching is, kind of towards the top portion of the map, that is the UNESCO World Heritage Site. You can also see that, well, I guess you can't see it on this map, but that area right now is zoned agriculture. So right now, that area within the UNESCO World Heritage Site can, as of right, build farm supportive uses or have farm supportive uses on their properties if they are farms.
Okay, so the same activities can happen in the UNESCO heritage site as can happen in agricultural land generally?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Windsor. Yes, in this area, the way that the zoning works, yes. So the only area right now where you can't do farm supportive uses in this entire map is the center section, which is the historic hamlet of Grand Pré.
The hatch section.
No, not the hatch section, just the red outlined box area.
Okay.
That is the historic hamlet of Grand Pré, and that is the only place right now that farm supportive uses is not permitted.
Okay, thank you. And just one further question. We make the text amendment, it applies to all land with the zoning then?
Sorry, can you repeat yourself?
So we're doing a text amendment here. I'm just trying to understand the application. Is it going to be just unique to this particular area or for any property that with this zoning?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Winsler. So the only properties that can utilize farm supportive uses are properties that are farms. So that, as I stated earlier, that limits the properties within this zone, because even on Old Post Road, there are larger lots, but the front portion where the residential dwelling is within the historic hamlet, but the back portion of those lots, which are agricultural, are within the agricultural designation.
Okay, so a portion of the land is within and a portion is without. And we're trying to make it all the same. I'm sorry if I'm confused here, but
Sorry, could you repeat your question one more time, Councillor Windsor, please?
thank you. I'm just trying to clarify, and I wasn't able to see exactly. What I think I'm understanding is that this piece of property that we're asking to zone, it's a portion is in the hatched area and a portion is in the boundary area. Is that right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Windsor. So this is not a site-specific application. There is a site that triggered the application.
Right,
the site that triggered the application is entirely within the A5 zone. This amendment is to the permitted uses in the A5 zone. So in addition to the property that triggered the amendment, the additional permitted use is enabled on all of the properties within the A5 zone, provided they are a farming business.
And that's what I was asking when I started this question, is does it apply to this property or just generally to all property with this zoning? Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks. Just curious if we know how many registered farms are within the A5 zone. I think it's, I noted, it at one point it is noted that this is likely the only property that is a registered farm. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Deputy Mayor. So within the A5 zone, that is the only parcel that can do that, because the other ones that have farms on them are the ones along Old Post Road, where the agricultural part is within the agricultural designation.
And would already allow a farm supportive use.
Yes.
And that, yeah, so the front portion, the difference would be that there would be a farm supportive use allowed on that front portion of the property if it fit. But it is already allowed on the property, it just has to be within the A1.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from councillors by way of clarification of the presenter? Seeing none, questions, representations from the public? I'm sorry, Councillor Granger, did you have a question?
I didn't have a question, but before you begin, I just wanted people to really use your outside voice. I'm a little hard of hearing, and I really want to hear what you have to say. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Granger. I agree, it's very difficult to hear. My name is Naomi Blanchard. I live at 2176 Grand Pré Road. It's nice to be here. I haven't been here for years. I've been and talking again about planning. I'm a planner by profession, but I'm a different kind of planner. I'm not going to quote the MPS strategy. I'm not going to read the slides. This proposed text amendment, I want to say at the outset, I am supportive 150% of an expansion and a development of Grand Pré Winery. Grand Pré Winery, if you think of Grand Pré like a mall in the old days when we built malls, we'd have anchor tenants. At one end, we've got Parks Canada and the National Historic Site and the interpretation site of the wider UNESCO area. And at the other end, you've got the entry into the Grand Pré with the big sign on the top, Hans Peter put up, winery. And I have watched, having lived in Grand Pré now for 26 years, my husband and I watched the development of the wine industry, both in Grand Pré and in the Valley. And I mean, development is always going to happen. That's why I spent my career doing development, lots of uncomfortable things. But the trick is that you have to engage the communities of interest. And the problem with this proposed text amendment, that it has not engaged the communities of interest. The Grand Pré has had a long history of public participation. Long before I arrived in 1997, had heritage studies and all kinds of work. It's recognized in the province, nationally, and in the world as a unique place. And I feel, as a planner, a resident, that I have to speak up to say that this needs to be managed better. Should enhancement of what Grand Pré Winery does happen? Yes, but it should happen in a site-specific way. With all due respect to Ms. Ullman, who has quoted at length the MPS, I don't think that let me see if this works. No, it doesn't. What do I press the yellow button? Trish? Do I point it somewhere? Oh, there you go. The devil will get you every time with technology. Thank you. Just like this. That one, okay. All right, so let's go quickly through here. It's been a UNESCO site, it's a heritage hamlet. We're not talking about heritage at this point. This is about land use planning. It's been studied for a long time, since 1990. UNESCO designation happened in 2012. It was the commitment of the municipality at that time that they would be, or it would be responsible for land use planning within the designated area, and secondly, in the buffer, and obviously in the buffer zone. The property under discussion, which has triggered the application, to use your words, is that's in the buffer zone. The second thing, when in reviewing this case, going through the municipal planning strategy, again and again, it's the municipality has committed to exceed the public requirements, public consultation requirements of the Municipal Government Act. Okay? This, differences of opinion are inevitable and should be encouraged, but transparency is vital. This happened when the winery, rightly so, looked at the adjacent parcel, which is currently owned by a councillor, so that's why he's not at the table. But it's very definitely the access point into Grand Pré. When you come off the highway, you come past Angle, the first thing you see is that field or slope. It was in agricultural use. I think somewhere it said it wasn't until last year. If you look, I don't know, did you put that other map up? Did you include that in the presentation? I didn't. No, you didn't. Okay. Well, I'm going to, if you'll excuse me.
Sure, go ahead.
Very quickly. This is Thank you for your patience. This is an old map. It was, but it's part of the municipal planning strategy. If you go online, it's there as under the Heritage Conservation District Plan. As the staff have very properly pointed out to me, this is not a bylaw. This is recommendations, but it does sit on the website, and it's the overall policy paradigm, if you like, to look at Grand Pre. I'd like to draw your attention to two things. First, the view locations. First of all, the public, the site of Grand Pre Winery where it wants to develop is at number 5. And I'd also draw your attention to number 1, which was on Old Post Road. Now, at that time, it had 2 houses on it. I was part of an initiative in the community to remove those buildings and realize that view over the parkland, and it's now on Google Maps, and everybody knows it as the Grand Pre UNESCO site view park. I'm not suggesting that the parcel next to the current winery be kept as a view. Nonetheless, this map shows you the context. That these are critical points to understand the sense of place that that Grand Pre represents. Okay. This is exciting for Grand Pre Winery. I mean, the details need to be known by the members of the community and the members of the immediate neighbors. The request is site-specific, and yet you're applying a general rule. The Grand Pre Winery is not looking at any other A5 land in the community. So therefore, you should have a site-specific response. I don't understand that there's a reluctance to follow an amendment to the municipal planning strategy when at the hearings I attend, everyone has 2 or 3 times. I realize it's onerous, but I think this is onerous because this will be appealed. Rather, I was told it wasn't possible. I was told that the future landowners requested this zoning amendment, and it's very vague. It could allow, I would dispute Ms. Ullman's comments, that there could be further development throughout the rural hamlet, and no analysis has been done or shared to clarify what the change to A5 would mean for the community and the cohesive sense of place. The issues I have with this application is that there's been inconsistency with the long-established community discussion. The public information meeting was held in Coldbrook here. It wasn't held in the community. If you want to engage people, get them on your side, get support, you do stuff in the community of interest. And that, I was told, was because the councillor had a conflict of interest. I wasn't quite sure how the councillor's conflict of interest affected where we hold a public information meeting, which he is standing back from. So that certainly was a red flag for me and for other people in the community. And the perception of secrecy pushed through. The importance of the site was identified in the early 90s. It's on the website. It's talked about it, primarily in the Heritage Plan. The unknown risks, I can't, just, with all due respect, a planner saying it won't happen doesn't cut it. Everything changes. The whole point is that site was originally expected to be the visitor center. We're not going to have a physical visitor center. Those things are gone with changing technology. So that, hasn't been addressed. And the other issue is if you're not doing a site-specific request, then everybody who's affected, including myself at 2176 Grand Pre Road, should have received information about this, because it's directly affecting my property and the zoning there too. I am not aware, and because I couldn't find it actually in the plan, what a farm is. I have 20 fruit trees that I can produce and sell and do whatever. Does that constitute a farm or doesn't it? My land is entirely in A5, not in A1, as Ms. Ullman was suggesting, the ones on Old Post Road. Lastly, I suggest to Council that you stop that text amendment now. You initiate a site-specific development agreement with the full involvement of the community at a locally held public information meeting. You avoid further seeing county, just they're getting it, pushing it through kind of thing, I've heard. And then there'll be an appeal. I'll tell you notice, and I told staff in November that any change to my designation of a text amendment would be appealed because it's not consistent with the work that was done for the UNESCO site and the heritage planning. And, it's unfortunate, but there's been a lack of corporate memory. And, when I went through the MPS for Grand Pré, it's old. It's not been updated. It still talks about planning for UNESCO and putting an application in. I know it's not top priority, but it really needs to get fixed up. It talks about having a heritage advisory committee. There's no such animal. The Heritage Society in Grand Pré no longer functions. So there's a lot of things that need to be cleaned up. And I would love Grand Pré Winery to fulfill its potential in the next 20 years. It's been 20 plus years. But it needs to be done with the concurrence of the community, and it needs to be done in a transparent fashion with a site-specific development agreement. Now, and that's basically what I was saying, except the Community Association, for which I do not speak, I'm speaking personally here. The Community Association has initiated some discussion around traffic. Traffic is an area of, pardon the pun, is a matter of concern in the community with tourism, with bicycles, pedestrians, all of those people, and that needs to be addressed. If you don't have a development agreement, you cannot ensure that those things won't be exacerbated by just a change, an amendment to the zone. So this is really a time where a development agreement is the best vehicle. And everybody can input and you can do it properly. And personally, I think Grand Pré has been called by the county the jewel in the crown of Kings County. So I think that
I'm sorry, I missed that last part.
I said that personally,
yes.
I feel that Grand Pré has been, to my information, has been told as the jewel in the crown of Kings County. I think there are other jewels, but certainly one of them. And that I think it merits appropriate planning attention. And it would be remiss of me not to say this. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Blanchard. Any questions of clarification of Ms. Blanchard? Councillor Windsor has a question, Ms. Blanchard.
So yeah, I just have a question. The objective of Grand Pré Winery, you're okay with. It's just a mechanism, and your concern is that there will be other developments in the other A5 area that's going to be affected by the text amendment? Is that?
That's part of it. If you don't have a development agreement at that site, you cannot manage and share with the community what it's going to look like. Where is the processing facility to do? My understanding, and I don't have this in, but that processing that's currently done probably in Berwick, canning and bottling, is going to be moved to that site. Let's face it, a processing site is an industrial use. It needs to be appropriately buffered with berms or with trees or whatever. And the other issue is the traffic. Understandably, Grand Pré Winery has suffered from its own success in the sense that the traffic on the number 1 highway is really an issue, particularly the commercial type trucking traffic. They're getting many more tourists than in the last early part of the last 20 years. So there's two issues to sort of get back to your question. Two issues. One, yes, I don't think this change should apply to the rest of the A5 lots in the district. And number two, if you don't have a development agreement, we cannot ensure and have everybody on side that access into the site is done. I mean, we don't know any details about this proposal, other than it's to take manufacturing, bottling and processing facilities that aren't big enough on their current land, and bring them presumably from Berwick. But that's hearsay, so I haven't.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions of clarification? There are no further questions. Thank you, Ms. Blanchard. Is there any other representation from the public concerning this particular application? Yes, please come forward and just state your name and place of residence, please.
Okay, Mary Dontremont, actually. I was with the other development issue. But I'm a farmer and, you know, part of the Grape Growers Association of Nova Scotia, actually. And just in listening to the current... Sure. You hear me okay? I hate being loud. I'm kind of an introvert, but anyway.
Don't hesitate. We have hearing issues all over the table here.
Anyways, and just the little bit of information that I've ascertained in this last 5 minutes of this situation, I have to have empathy on the farmer's side in this, and Grand Prix in general. Grand Prix Wineries, I'm sure, has a full intention of developing something that will provide jobs and economic growth and more tourism to Nova Scotia in general. And I think that farmers as a whole, as a collective, are one of Nova Scotia's biggest entrepreneurs, and as council should be supported in whatever development growth that they need to sustain our small acreages. We can't compete against the big companies and I'm talking about large farms they're not in Nova Scotia. And I think that it should be sincerely considered that if they're looking to do this, that they need this to sustain their business and grow further and make it worth their while to keep production in grapes. I mean, this year alone, we had the polar vortex there in February, and my understanding is that it's probably lost about 70% of the grapes that were grown in Nova Scotia, and we were finally getting to the place where a lot of the wineries and things like that were actually getting to be quite successful. Now the grape growers themselves are only going to have 30% of their crop, and the guys who are making the wine and stuff like that are going to have to ship their grapes in. So I just think it's fair to consider that this is an agricultural community, particularly in Grand Pré, and with UNESCO involved in it, you would think that they would want to support the agricultural community. That's what brings these people to this area.
Thank you. Are there any questions of this speaker from council? There are none. You were clear. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Jason Lynch. I'm the applicant. I'd just like to speak about just a little bit about historical context and intent. My family moved to the Hortonville Grand Pré area in the early 70s as farmers, happened to renovate and reside in what was the oldest house in the Grand Pré Hortonville area. That house was lost prior to these rules and regulations coming in around the hamlet. So I'm both very supportive and aware of historical context as well as farming. But to speak a little bit more to that, we've got a family who immigrated to Canada in the mid-90s, bought a rural farm in Nova Scotia, banked their livelihood on coming here to grow their business. Was supportive of the historical context and protecting Grand Pré, but I think we've had a bit of, one's not helping the other, but I don't think there's any ill intent on any side. When I first reached out to how do we grow this agricultural business in a sustainable way, in which we could protect the integrity of the community as well as we've all seen from the maps. So for example, if you look at that map of the hamlet, right across from the View Park, which was put in to show the area, the UNESCO site, right across the street is A1, zoned A1. We own that land. We could currently do a large-scale development that doesn't conform with the community. The family is very aware of the historical context, but we just want to be able to proceed, grow our business in a way that protects it. At that time, the text amendment seemed like the best solution that did it. I understand from a community standpoint of wanting to protect certain things, but I just wanted to give some context to farming and historical protection. We need to have both without either hindering the other. Agricultural development in Nova Scotia in the heart of the Annapolis Valley is integral to our economy, our job growth, to all of it. And I just think that this is kind of, it was not anyone's intent when the hamlet was derived to hinder agricultural growth, nor is it our intent to change the historical context of the hamlet, but to help protect it. Because as you've all seen from that map, the historical area is very small. There's a lot of A1 land surrounding it, where all of that stuff, and a lot of the people that are in that hamlet that have residential homes now, also have A1 land and can do this, but we cannot. And I don't think the family coming into the community in the early 90s, where none of this existed, was aware that starting an agricultural farm in Canada, that this would hinder their ability to grow their business, create employment, and contribute to the economy. So for us, this is really just about trying to be aware of both sides, and the text amendment was what was put forward, because at the time the development agreement wasn't an option to us. It's not that we were opposed to doing a development agreement and engaging the community, but there is time to be considered. As the previous speaker said, we just endured on February 2nd a polar vortex, which potentially took out 70% of our crop. So can I answer, do we have a plan right now to develop this property? No. We don't even know if we're gonna have a harvest this year. But do we want to protect the ability for the business to grow in a sustained way over the next couple of years? Yes. But we will have to make a choice at some point as to whether it's acquiring A1 land within the community that is going to affect the impact, the look, the sight lines of this community, or acquire this property to conform within the community's intent. So it's a bit of a rock and a hard place for all of us, I think. But I don't think there's any ill intent on any side. It's just where we are. So it's, figuring out if the text amendment or something else is doable. But at the time, it was the text amendment that seemed like it would work. So thank you for your time. Just wanted to give you a little bit of context. Is there any questions for me?
Thank you. I was just going to ask you to stand in your place, Mr. Lynch, because the Deputy Mayor has a question of clarification.
Yeah.
Thank you. So my question is around time, and how long? When was the initial application put in? I guess how much time has been put in at this point? And maybe it's in the document somewhere, but
well over a year.
Well over a year.
I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact date because I went from 2 years of work on a development agreement into this project.
Right.
So I'd have to get Katie to August. Yeah. August. So we went from redoing our development agreement, which took multiple years, which after doing that, because we developed an inn on the Grand Pré property, so we had to redo our development agreement in order to be able to do the inn. And we rolled from that into this as our space is becoming very, very small.
Absolutely, I remember. And you say you don't have a timeline by which you wish to have a facility built or?
I had a timeline prior to February 2nd.
Right.
Pre-February 2nd, the hope would have been potentially by 2025 to start developing the site. But at this point, I can honestly say it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
You know, maybe if we're lucky, 70%, but we won't know till June about overall plant death. If we have overall plant death in our vineyards, we're looking at 5 years before we have product. So if we don't have grapes, we don't, you know, so it could get very well pushed down the road. But we do need to future plan for when we've recovered.
Absolutely.
Which probably 3 to 5 years for full recovery, barring any major catastrophe again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Lynch. There are no other questions from
Thank
us.
you.
Thanks. Any other person in the public wish to comment on this particular application? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Lisette Garant, and I live at 2076 Grand Pré Road, directly opposite this
All right,
subject property.
I think you have it blown up now, if you check. Yeah.
So if you see that little curve next to the Grand Pré Road, there's a little cross piece there. I'm directly across there. And my interest in this property is 3 or 4 different ways. Naomi did a very good job of doing the history, so I won't go through all that. But I do want to say about the Part 4 of the policies for the Grand Pré Conservation District. A core conservation district consisting of properties whose owners responded positively to the opinion survey that Naomi mentioned. And the second part is an area considered eligible for future inclusion in the conservation district based on the architectural character, etc. Those are the stated goals, and my interest is excuse me for a second here, compose
Take your time.
myself.
It's okay.
I'm going to ask this question first because it's really driving me crazy and I can't think of anything else. This lady here mentioned something about not being able to do it in a development agreement, but on the zone bylaw map, when I zoomed it up, it had 2 or 3 places that had development agreements. So I'm not really understanding why that they couldn't do a development agreement for this one.
We can respond to that, I think.
Through Mr. Mayor to the speaker. So the Municipal Government Act requires a few things for us to be able to do a development agreement. The first thing is it needs to be established in policy in the municipal planning strategy. The second thing is that it generally needs to indicate what use or what types of uses are enabled through that development agreement and a list of criteria and where. So this would, for a development agreement option here, it would be within the A5 zone. That's typically how we ascribe our development agreements. And it would provide a list of criteria that council needs to consider in order to provide an approval. So without that policy, there's no ability for council to consider a development agreement because there's no criteria established. There's nothing saying what makes this appropriate or inappropriate. Those criteria need to be established through a separate planning policy, which would be the Municipal Planning Strategy Amendment. So that's why a development agreement can't be contemplated. There are other development agreements in Grand Pré, including on the Grand Pré Wines property. Most of those, if not all of them, were entered into under our previous set of planning documents, which had different enabling policies. It should be pointed out that a policy for a development agreement for this type of application also did not exist in the 1992 municipal planning strategy. So that's important to point out. So that's what is needed for a development agreement. That's why when we've been discussing what would need to happen for that to occur, we've said that we would need to amend the municipal planning strategy to draft and develop that policy and the list of criteria that council would have to consider when contemplating such an application should one occur.
Thank you, Ms. Mosher.
Thank you. For me personally, I feel like not having a development agreement is a problem for the reasons that the previous development agreement from Greenwood mentioned. You have more control over what gets put in there and where it gets placed and so on. And for me, that's really important because of the fact that it's a water course. A water course, according to the Nova Scotia Water Alteration Standard, must not be permanently to accommodate construction or modification. You can't change the water course just because you want to put a building there. And that field floods every winter and every spring. As recently as last weekend, that field was flooded. And so my concern from a personal point of view is if there's a building there and pavement there and so on, where's that water going to go but other on my property? So that's one concern I have. Specific to the property, as I mentioned about the water and the pavement and the buildings, but also the amount of traffic on that road. We have a honey stand right there at the end of our driveway, and there's dozens of people every day during the summertime stopping at that stand, dozens of people riding their bicycles around there, and dozens of really huge tractors going by. And I would be concerned that any entrance or exits coming from that piece of property would cause accidents, because we've seen several accidents in the 4 years that we've been here. And to Naomi's point about the views of the landscapes, that is a significant view, the pasture land from it's number 5, the view number 5 on the plan, on the map. And I feel like that part, my house and that field, they're both in the future inclusion zone on the future inclusion map. And just going back to the development agreement, I live in Mount Uniacke when I'm not here, and some people bought the land next door to us, 12.9 acres, and they built a horse barn 100 feet from our house, and when we go out in the backyard now, all we smell is horse poo. And I wouldn't want something like that to be happening to the entrance to Grand Pre, having some kind of smelly something or other coming into the historic site. I think that would be bad. But the issue is bigger than just neighboring properties. I was surprised, as some of the other people mentioned, that it was not more widely advertised specifically to all residents of such of an important historic area, and also because of the zoning. It's the reason that we bought in Grand Pre is the historic site. We were looking for a place where our daughter could stay to go to Acadia. We could have picked anywhere on the bus route. We could have picked Horton. We could have picked Wolfville. We could have picked New Minas, Kentville. But we picked Grand Pre because it's a historic site. And I have relatives buried somewhere in Grand Pre. And my Acadian heritage is not just about me. It's about all the Acadians all over the world that comes here. And I think that's something that we got to bear in mind too when we're making these decisions. We're not just making them for ourselves. We're making them for many, many people outside ourselves. And as far as the farming part goes, we actually do have a farm in that little tiny lot across the road there. Our livestock is bees. And our bees go onto that great big field there. And we don't have the kind of income some people have from their farms, but it is very important to us. And having that field plowed down and paved over would be a harm to our business. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions of clarification of this speaker from council? No? Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak from the public on this particular application? No? Then I'll declare the hearing on this particular application to be closed, and I adjourn the, unless there's something further from staff. No? And I'll adjourn the public hearing, and I'll declare a recess for 15 minutes to give council a health break before we come back to begin our council session. Thank you. Councillor Harding with us? Okay.
Yes, I am.
Good evening. Well, good evening, Council, ladies and gentlemen, those watching online. Councillor Harding is with us via Teams, and I want it noted that Councillor Killam is here, so when I call the roll call and he doesn't answer, it's simply because he left the room momentarily. I'll call the meeting of council to order, and we'll begin with roll call, please.
I'm here.
That fellow in the clouds is here.
Timmy's here.
as is the rest of council, including Councillor Killam. So all council is present for the purposes of the meeting. Moving to item 2, looking at the agenda. If you are happy with the agenda, I'd like a mover to approve. Councillor Windsor, seconded by Councillor Allen. Any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor or otherwise of the motion, please vote now.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor. That's unanimously approved as circulated. Thank you. And for the purposes of the public, councillors are aware of this, of course, but once an agenda has been approved, and it's not always approved in the same form that it comes before us, so in whatever form it is approved, once councillors are aware of the contents of the agenda, if they have if they wish to declare a conflict of interest with respect to any item on the agenda, this would be the appropriate time to indicate which item it is with respect to which they have a conflict. Is there anybody that, oh yes, Councillor Allen.
Mayor, I have a conflict of interest with 6C.
Very well, then Councillor, I would thank you for that and ask you to step away from the table at the time that we consider that particular item. And you said it's 6C? Anyone else with any conflict they wish to declare? No. Moving then to item 4, approval of the minutes. Firstly, with respect, with respect both to the minutes of March 7th, 2023, and of council, and then March 7th, 2023, of a joint council meeting that took place with Wolfville. I'm looking for a motion to approve those minutes. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Hertel. Any discussion? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Retired. On page 5, there's a vote regarding a motion on some properties in Cambridge. It says I didn't vote, but I think I did. So I'm just wondering if we could have that. I did vote on every other motion at the meeting, and I don't remember that I was absent from my seat at that moment.
We will see to it that the record is checked, and if you were, then the record will be amended accordingly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anything else on the minutes? If not, all those in favor or otherwise. Did I get a mover and seconder? Yes, yes, I did, of course. It is only 8:30. Please vote now.
Yay for
Thank you.
Mr. Harding.
Motion's unanimously passed. Moving to item 5, business arising from the minutes of March 7th, council. Any business arising that any councillor has noted? Seeing none, any business arising from the joint council meeting of March 7th? Seeing none. Moving to item 6, Planning Advisory Committee recommendations. Councillor Armstrong, as chair of the Planning Advisory Committee, if you would be so kind as to read the motions. I'm sorry, I do have to turn your light on, don't I? And you do have to remind me that it's late.
Thank you. That Municipal Council give final reading to proposed amendments to the Municipal Planning Strategy and Land Use Bylaw to include PID 555-12149, 5507297, 555-07313, 553-08928, and 555-07305 in the growth center of the Greenwood boundary. Redesignate the lands as residential on the future land use map and rezone the Comprehensive Neighborhood Development R5 zone on the zoning map. And to rezone PIDs 554-90163, 554-90171, 554-89330, and 55512131 to the Comprehensive Neighborhood Development R5 zone on the zoning map, which will permit comprehensive residential development as described in Appendix B through G of the report dated October 11, 2022. I so move.
Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Windsor. Any discussion on the motion? Looking first to the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Matart. I am really struggling with this particular planning item for a couple of reasons. I know last time we discussed this, I had expressed some concern around the sort of unique park-like elements, which were referenced tonight during the public hearing, of some of the lands that are included here. And so I was comforted at that point by the fact that R5 zoning, R5, not C5, I know better, that R5 zoning does allow council a great deal of control over that development. But I don't know that I'm comfortable any longer with that, because it may not be this council that is the one that decides on the comprehensive neighborhood development. It may be a different council with different I would be very comfortable with this council, but we don't know when this is coming. There's a small portion of those 140 acres that I think would be excellent, the ones that were already developed. The land along the road, particularly, and maybe back a little bit. But I really do empathize with the concerns of the community that came forward tonight. And I do worry that it may lead to more development in that area than I'm comfortable with by putting it into the growth center and recognizing all that comes along with doing that. So I supported it before. I don't support it tonight, and I won't be voting in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Windsor.
Thank you, Mayor. I second the motion. I heard some comments this evening. It would cause one to think, but I am pleased to support the motion. One of the comments that I heard was with respect to the work that we've done during the development of our municipal planning strategy. And of course, that was several years ago, and our vision for growth, I think we can say, has certainly got swallowed up over the last 4 or 5 years. And part of what motivated us in this direction to see if this land was an option is because of the growth pressures that's all around us here in this county, and the housing shortages. And so I think it's appropriate to add to the growth center, and we don't want to run out of space before we say, gee, we need to add to the growth center. We need to be well ahead in the planning. The comments on the parkland and the playground area, very legitimate, but I think one of the things I've heard staff comment before is in the notion of comprehensive. You can discuss all kinds of things and work them into the plans. So hopefully, or there's other ways to develop parks, area parks in neighborhoods or campgrounds. So I think those mechanisms would be available in addition to the options through a comprehensive development for neighborhood playground areas and the like. So I am comfortable with our position from the past and adding to the growth center, and certainly seeing the growing pressures upon us to stay ahead in terms of having land available for development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Meisner.
Yes, I will be voting in favor of this motion. I do hear the concerns, and I think that they are just and valid. However, I think it's paramount that we prepare for what could be coming, what we know is coming, what's happening right now. In order, we don't want to have to work backwards once if lands become surplus. I think it's important that we are prepared and in place to move forward at that time. And I think that also, it's not just about the people that are coming, as one of the concerns is why are we making these people come here if we don't have healthcare, if we don't have education. It's not that people are coming here, it's that people already live here and can't find places to live here. It's not just people that are coming from away. I think that it's important to take those points that have been raised in terms of the quality of life for the surrounding community, and keep those in our back pocket as we do move forward and as we make plans, that we don't take away from what exists, but also that we are in a position to be ready when the time comes. So I will be voting in favor of this today.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very much in favor of this motion, and I will be voting in favor. Just a few things that I wanted to bring up. The D&D housing that was on this site was fully demolished in the year 2006, and it's been sitting vacant now for almost 17 years. But before that happened, this was a really vibrant neighborhood that had between 300 and 400 houses on it. It was, a self-contained little neighborhood with 2 schools and sidewalks and all of these things. And the back part of the property that we have included in this was, and is still wooded and has some trails and stuff through it. Those were fire lanes to access the PMQs. And so, if at some point we decided that we didn't want to develop that, you could still put more than enough houses in on this property. But I think that, although I appreciate the comments that were made by the people in the audience this evening, I really think that we're getting way too far ahead of ourselves, because this could take years, absolutely years. And in the end, they could say no. But if they say yes, do we want to wait another year to go through this planning process to get this land ready for it? So I'm in favor of it because I think it's some move that we should make now, just on the off chance that maybe D&D will say, yes, we don't want to see this land vacant. I think that the people at 14 Wing are very cognizant of the fact that they are bringing in all of these people to work on the base, more service personnel all the time, and there's no place for them to live. They're not building any more PMQs as far as I know, and so the local area has to absorb them, and they're just finding it very difficult for housing. So let's hope they take that into consideration. But for now, let's put the groundwork in place, and hopefully we'll see something there before the end of my time. Thank you.
Your time on council, you mean?
No, my time period. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Armstrong's comments have put my mind at ease somewhat. And I want to clarify, I don't oppose housing development on this site at all. Just, I'm very mindful of the doors it opens when we include parcels of land within the growth center. And, you know, the fact that and actually what did change my mind or make me sort of oppose the motion was the idea that it is going to take a long time, and that there may be, you know, if this happens in 10 years, that maybe the care may not be taken as part of the zoning. And I recognize that we have so many stopgaps in place to prevent that from happening, whether it's public engagement, like mindful planning policies, and wonderful staff who do their best to create complete communities. And like, I am so mindful of all those things. But I think the one thing that's holding me back is just the doors that it opens. And so I still won't be supporting it. I have a feeling that it doesn't matter. And that's okay. But I really want to be on the record as being really, really mindful of the treed area, those beautiful trails, and the risk that it can pose. But there's beautiful treed areas within growth centers. So I also recognize that too. As always, I kind of sit on the fence, but that's where I'll be voting this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other comments or debate? I should explain my vote as well. I'll be voting in favor of the motion for the same reasons that Councillor Armstrong has indicated, that if this property is to become available for development by private enterprise, it's necessary that we be ready and that we not wait until we receive piecemeal applications that we must deal with that have no parameters around them. And because then when you start to say no to each and every one, or you haven't yet put in appropriate zoning with respect to the property, then you've caused people a lot of grief. So this signals to people what type of development is anticipated, what procedure they would have to go through in order to get permission to develop, and that they would have to negotiate with the municipality with respect to their developments. As to when it might become available, we have absolutely no idea. The DND had never thought about freeing it up to become part of the municipally zoned area, and may not ever. Notwithstanding that, if, to Councillor Armstrong's point, if we're not ready, then we haven't done our job. It may be that subsequent councils following us may come at this from a different direction, or may direct staff to review and come back. But for now, I believe that we have to proceed as has been recommended. If and it must be said as well that we have many employers within this municipality that are constantly bringing to us their problems associated with finding residential accommodations for their people. Even in the New Minas area, people can't find a place to live, so that they have to live out of the New Minas area, and living out of the New Minas area if they're working for minimum wage or a little more at some of the establishments in New Minas, then it's too costly for them to get back and forth. We have Greenwood, we have Michelin, who has said, you know, we bring people in, the first thing they want to know is what's the status of the housing, what can we do for them? They have difficulty finding housing. We have 14 Wing that is saying people are not going to even consider staying here after retirement because, and a lot of them are retiring right now as they are at Michelin as well. A lot of them are retiring right now, and if there is not housing available, and they are complaining that it's not, then we lose people that would prefer to stay within our municipality. So this is anticipatory but necessary in my view, and that's the reason that I'll be voting in favor of it. Are there any other comments arising from the comments of other councillors? If you are ready, then I'll call the question. All those in favor or otherwise, please vote now.
Yay for me.
Thank you. That motion passes unanimously with the exception of one vote. Councillor Allen wants to register that he did vote in favor, and Councillor Harding has voted in favor, and we have one negative vote. So the motion is passed. Councillor Allen, we're now moving to item C, if you'd like to leave the table. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I ticked off B. I didn't mean to tick you off as well. So we're going back to B. Application to rezone a portion of the property in Greenwood. Councillor Armstrong, your light's on.
Thank you. The Municipal Council give final reading to the application to rezone a portion of PID 55120059 from the residential 1 and 2 unit R2 zone to the residential mixed density R3 zone as described in Appendix D of the report dated February 14th, 2023. I so move.
Thank you. A seconder? Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Any discussion? Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor or otherwise of the motion, please vote now.
Yay from Councillor Harding.
Thank you, Councillor. That's unanimously passed. Thank you. Councillor Armstrong, item C, and Councillor Allen is leaving. Please let the record note that Councillor Allen has left his seat for this particular item.
That Municipal Council give final reading to the amendments to the text of the land use bylaw to add farm supportive uses to the list of permitted uses in the historic hamlet of Grand Pré A5 zone as described in Appendix A of the report dated February 14th, 2023. I so move.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Windsor. Discussion on the motion, please. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Matar. So I voted against this at the last meeting in which this came before us because I felt that it deserved a different process, and not that I oppose the development at all. On the contrary, I'm very supportive of the development, very supportive of the usage of the property to do the plan, and think it's a wonderful addition to the community and to Kings County. And I thought that Morristown was the jewel of Kings County, but I accept Grand Pré could be an equal substitute. I'm really struggling with this one because I do believe development agreements to be a better way of doing municipal planning in really tight situations like this one, where it's such a small zone. And I recognize that in A1, this can happen, and it's right next door, and I get that. I don't know that that, to me, is a good enough reason to make the text amendment for A5, because A5 and A1 are different, and they're different for a reason, because A5 has that historical piece. And when you go to Grand Pre and you see the homes, and I really empathize with this idea of place, and it is important, and it is not something that we should take lightly when it comes to changing it. So I wish, if time could have been turned back, that we had an MPS amendment that created a new policy that allowed farm supportive uses in the A5 by development agreement in the A5 zone. And I think that hearing from the applicant that there's some time, that would be a preferable use, a preferable course of action. And while I know, as has already been pointed out tonight, that these planning processes take a really long time, I think we have time. And I think that it's a very important consideration. And I would like to see this development happen, but I would like to see it happen by development agreement. And I, again, also recognize that farm supportive uses probably could have or should have been included as an allowable use in the 2019 document. So the fact that we're here today is probably due to that one oversight. But it didn't, and it's not included as a allowable as of right use currently in A5, and I think it should be by development agreement, as I think should most things be in the Grand Pre, in A5, particularly in that district. So I will be voting against this and encourage my councilors to also vote against this with putting it with direction to staff to pursue an alternate route through development agreement on this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Meisner.
Well, there goes everything I was going to say. I guess now Emily's, our Deputy Mayor has my thoughts turning. But I too agree that in a lot of ways a development agreement would have been the more ideal way to go about this. And hearing from staff and hearing that that's not the avenue that we do have at hand. And looking at the possibilities, as we've heard from the applicant, he has said they do also own A1 land, that they could by right go and do this. And in doing that, that means that we would be taking out of active production to build buildings, which goes against the whole purpose of maintaining agricultural land and making sure that agricultural land is kept as it is for long term. I hear the passion in the community about the heritage, about how important it is to maintain things the way that they were, the way that things have been in the heritage designation. But I think it's also important to note that part of our heritage is agriculture, and it is adapting, and it is resiliency. And we are hearing that today from our applicant, that there is resiliency here. You never know what's going to happen. You have your best laid plans before you, and you never know what nature is going to throw at you. We have resiliency there. The applicant spoke passionately about heritage, and I think it is well noted that that would be very considered in moving forward in the planning process. What I'm hearing is not something that would be out of line with the heritage that surrounds the area, or would make smelly things in people's backyards, as was a complaint. I feel like this is not a malicious or facetious kind of thing, that it is a business trying to grow within its current area, within its current possibility under the conditions and the terms that our policies currently hold. I don't disagree with the Deputy Mayor that we do obviously need to look at our policy, but in terms of what we currently have at our hands in terms of options and abilities, I will be voting in favor of this because our present day documents and policies, it is in line with the policy, with the surrounding community, and with our greater goal as part of Kings County. So I will be voting in favor of this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Windsor.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be voting in favor of this motion as well, and I would just like to briefly explain why. And I think the comments were, what I want to say was pretty inerrant in what Councillor Meisner just said. And some of the sentiments I think that our Deputy Minister was feeling when she was expressing her other views. I see it as, I think the heritage of the site, of the place out there in the agriculture has worked together in the past, and this is just one enhances the other, and it's a better package available to people to come to the area. So I've yet, in the time that I've been here in the valley, and as I've seen vineyards and wineries develop their facilities, everything is so appealing and fits in, and it's a credit. They become just part of the enticement to an area in their own right, and I won't name any because I don't want to leave any out. But so they're not going to derogate, in my view, from the areas that they are developed in, and it would be to the disadvantage of the farmer to do something like that. So I think there's enough motivation for our developer here, our farmer, Mr. Lynch, to do things that's going to be so pleasing that I think the community will, when they look at it, will be quite pleased and in fact proud of what's happening in their community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hurtle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will actually keep this brief. I believe that this is a great opportunity to clean up our bylaw and bring what is a as right use to an overlooked section of our bylaw. So we really need to make this amendment because this feels simply like a cleanup, and it should have been as right from the start in 2019. So it makes an incredible amount of sense to that we found this mistake and we're correcting this tonight. So I'll be voting in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor for the second time.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make it brief. I'll just say that I really wish we had anticipated the reaction in Grand Pré. And I know we have no crystal ball, but having been enacting planning policies for the county since 1979 and understanding the special nature of Grand Pré, I wish we had anticipated the potential reaction that the community would have to this particular change. And while there is no DA option currently, there could be one added. And I recognize that that takes time, but sometimes the most straightforward avenue is not the best avenue, particularly when there's so many different things at play. And I have no doubt that regardless of how this development takes place, it will be wonderful and beautiful like everything Grand Pré wine does. That is not my issue at all. It is simply the process by which it happens, and I don't think it was done the right way, and I think we could have done it differently, particularly taking into context the timelines of the applicant, and that it could have been done a better way. So that's the conclusion of my comments this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other debate, comments, explanation of your vote? If not, then it's incumbent upon me to give the reasons for my vote and the manner in which I intend to vote. I intend to vote in favor. I look to some of the comments of other councillors around the table who have already said that this is something that was evidently overlooked in 2019. It should have been included. It should not have been, I mean, if we go back for a moment to the Grand Pré and Area Community Plan, the comments that were made in the preambles, which, mind you, are not part of the legislation, but the comments that were made in the preambles, Council shall have regard to the following community vision statement for communities in the Grand Pré area. And the vision statement is that the Grand Pré and area communities work together with a shared interest in sustaining a healthy rural setting by conserving the culture, environment, and agricultural landscape. In defined areas, the larger community provides opportunities for community growth, agriculture, the recreation, use of shared open space, and local businesses. Under the agricultural comments, Grand Pré and area is an agricultural community. The surrounding agricultural lands and dike lands in the Grand Pré area are some of the most fertile in Nova Scotia. Under the heading Goal to sustain the agricultural community within its rural setting. Prohibit rural industrial within the Grand Pré and area. Encourage the agriculture industry and appropriately related businesses. It was always intended that agriculture be preserved. As a matter of fact, one of the most emphasized comments for this area is that agriculture be preserved. One cannot preserve agriculture without permitting agriculture to exist or limiting the manner in which it can exist as agriculture. In every other agricultural area within Grand Pré, if you go from the number 1 all the way to Long Island, this can be done as a right by any farmer. And for some reason, in 2019, we omitted to continue the use for the farmers in this particular small area. But everyone has been aware always that the agricultural uses are to be supported, and what we have before us is an amendment to the text of the land use bylaw. The reason, amongst others, why it's a text amendment is so that it can apply to everyone the same as their neighboring farmer properties. And it's an enabling provision to add farm supportive uses to the list of permitted uses in the hamlet. If you're not prepared to add farm supportive uses as of right, and if you want to restrict them to development agreements, what kind of restrictions do you anticipate that you're going to be putting in place on farm supportive use premises? So I take all the points. I fully understand that in this and in many, many other applications that we've dealt with recently, one of the primary objections from the public is that they don't feel that they were informed sufficiently. I take all of those comments to heart. It's another issue, and it's one that we must turn our minds to. Notwithstanding, we, in this application included, have exceeded our requirements, our legislative requirements. It's been commented to me that everybody in the A5 zone probably should have had an opportunity to at least be aware. And I take that to heart, but as I say, it's another matter. It's another issue, and it's one which we must turn our minds to. But with respect to this particular item, I believe that it just puts all agricultural users on the same foot, and that it should have been so throughout, and we really shouldn't have to be doing it now, but occasionally in a document the size of ours, there are oversights, and this is our opportunity to correct that oversight without any more limitations than any other farm that wants to put in a farm supportive use. So those are my reasons, be they valid in some people's minds or not. Are there any other comments arising out of the comments that have been made by previous speakers? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor or otherwise of the motion, please vote now. Councillor Harding?
Yay.
Thank you. The motion's passed with one negative vote. Thank you. Councillor Armstrong, we're moving to item D. Would Councillor Allen please come back to the table?
That Municipal Council give final consideration to entering into a development agreement to permit building and construction contractors' use and manufacturing use on the property located at 7096 Highway 1, PID 551-53696, Coldbrook, which is substantively the same for minor differences in form, as the draft set out in Appendix D of the report dated dated February 14th, 2023. I edited a bit there. I so move.
Good at it. Thank you. Seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hurtle. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor or otherwise, please vote now.
Councillor Harding, yay.
Thank you, Councillor. That's unanimously passed. Thank you. Councillor Armstrong, is that all you had?
Just the date of our next public hearing is Tuesday, June 6th, 6 p.m. in these chambers.
Tuesday, June 6th at 6. Thank you. Those are the PAC recommendations. Now moving on to item 7, administration. Proclamation requests, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 3 proclamation requests. It seems to be a busy time of year for proclamations. The first one is Autism Acceptance Month. We received a request from Autism Nova Scotia. We've had an autism proclamation every year since 2017. And there will be a flag raising tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. And the recommended motion is that Municipal Council proclaim April 2023 Autism Acceptance Month in the municipality of the County of Kings.
Do I have a mover of the motion? Moved by Councillor Meisner, seconded by Councillor Granger. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor or otherwise, please vote now.
Councillor Harding, yay.
Thank you, Councillor. Good night, Deputy Mayor. No, you're the Deputy Minister. That's passed unanimously. Thank you. The next one?
Next one is Lyme Disease Awareness Month. We received a request for a proclamation from Nova Scotia Lyme Support Group. This is the 5th year that we have a proclamation for Lyme disease. And the motion is that Municipal Council proclaim May 2023 Lyme Disease Awareness Month in the municipality of the County of Kings.
Thank you. Do I have a mover of the motion? Moved by Councillor Meisner. Seconded by Councillor Killam. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor or otherwise, please vote now.
Councillor Harding, yay.
Thank you, Councillor. That's unanimously passed. Thank you. Deputy, or Madam Clerk, rather.
So there's a third one, Cole-Wittenberg Day. This is organized by Rewind 89.3. We've had a proclamation every year since 2018, although this is the 7th year that they have the Radiothon. And the motion is that Municipal Council proclaim June 8th, 2023, Cole-Wittenberg Day in the municipality of the County of Kings.
Thank you. Mover, Councillor Meisner. Seconded by Councillor Allen. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor or otherwise, please vote now.
Councillor Harding, yay.
Thank you, Councillor. That's passed unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're moving to item B, amendments to policy admin 01-22, virtual meetings. It's been recommended that Municipal Council adopt amendments to policy admin 01-22, virtual meetings, as attached to the April 4th, 2023 Council agenda. Do I have a mover of the motion, please? Moved by the Deputy Mayor. Seconded by Councillor Meisner. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor or otherwise, please vote now.
Councillor Harding, yay.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Armstrong, are you voting in favor? Or against? Okay, then it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on to item C, amendments to policy PARS 08002, annual volunteer celebration and awards. It's recommended that Municipal Council adopt amendments to policy PARS 08002, annual volunteer celebration and awards, as attached to the April 4th, 2023 Council agenda. Any concerns? A mover of the motion is in order. Moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Discussion? Deputy Mayor.
Just briefly, this is one of the examples of something I think our council does that has changed so much in my time on council. I remember the first time we talked about this policy like ages ago, and sort of the way we governed at that time is totally different than how we do it now. And I think this is just an amazing example of progress in our municipality and on our council, and just the way we make decisions and the way we see our role as so much bigger and awesome. So that's all. I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor or otherwise, please vote now.
Councillor Harding, yay.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hurtle, how do you, Councillor Hurtle, let the record show Councillor Hurtle was out of his seat for the vote. So that is unanimously passed. Thank you. Moving to item 8, Committee of the Whole recommendations. The motions are in your agenda package, but it's been recommended by Committee of the Whole that Municipal Council approve the fiscal year 2023-2024 sidewalk construction priority list as appended to the March 21st, 2023 request for decision. Do I have a mover of the motion? Moved by Councillor Meisner, seconded by Councillor Granger. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor or otherwise, please vote now.
Councillor Harding, yay.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hurtle's out of his seat. So that is unanimously passed. Thank you. Moving on to item B, it's been recommended by Committee of the Whole that Municipal Council request that staff consider amendments to the sidewalk construction project prioritization policy to include playgrounds as similar catchments to school zones as part of the criteria for assessment. Do I have a mover of the motion? Moved by Councillor Meisner, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Discussion on the motion? So in addition to being cognizant of the fact that approaches to schools should have sidewalks, this indicates that the same type of criteria would be applied to school zones as to playgrounds. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor or otherwise, please vote now.
Councillor Harding, yay.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hurtle being out of his seat for this vote. It is unanimously passed. Thank you. Moving on to item D. I guess I missed item C, didn't I? For those listening online, that was Councillor Meisner just suggested we take a pause and sing our alphabet for the benefit of the mayor. It's been recommended by Committee of the Whole that Municipal Council give first reading to amend Bylaw 45, street lighting, as attached to the April 4th, 2023 Council agenda. A mover of the motion would be in order. Councillor Allen moves the motion. Councillor Meisner seconds. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor or otherwise, please vote now. Councillor Harding?
Councillor Harding, yay.
Thank you. That's unanimously passed. Thank you. And now item D. I don't know particularly which note item D falls under. A, B, C. That Municipal Council receive the General Operating Accountability Report for period ended December 31st, 2022 as information. Mover of the motion. Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor Granger. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor or otherwise, please vote now.
Councillor Harding, yay.
Thank you, Councillor. That's unanimous and passed. Item 8E, it's been recommended by Committee of the Whole that Municipal Council receive the Capital Accountability Report for the period ended December 31st, 2022 as information. Mover of the motion, Councillor Meisner. Seconder, Councillor Allen. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please vote now. These are simply,
yay.
Thank you, Councillor. These are simply items of receipt for information purposes that came forward from Committee of the Whole, so they're not in and of themselves operational matters. That's passed unanimously. Thank you. Moving to item 9, Committee and Boards Report. Councillor Harding, did you have anything to add to your Kings Point to Point Transit Society Board report?
No, I didn't. Thank you.
Any questions of the councillor on his report? Any verbal committee reports or board reports? Lights are coming on. Councillor Meisner.
Yes, I just wanted to add that Diversity Kings County met last night. We had a great roundtable discussion, I think. We have a really great group, and there's a lot of very impactful conversations that happen there. Some great events that are going to be coming to the municipality in the coming months. Our 2 staff on our diversity portfolio, along with their manager, are doing some great work and very dedicated to bringing the strategy of belonging up to its fruitfulness, and it's very exciting work. So that's what we did yesterday.
Thank you, Councillor. That's helpful. Councillor Granger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Port William Source Water Protection, we had a meeting March 6th. I haven't received the the minutes of that, so when I do, and when I have more of a voice, I'll get at it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Windsor.
Thank you. I'm just going to highlight a few things from the Valley RAN activity report. I didn't get that report to Yanni in a timely fashion, so it'll be attached later. Just a couple of highlights. The Regional Land and Asset Database is moving along quite well. There's been several discussions on it, and there's been some meetings with the King's geoinformatics specialists here, and there's expected to be public launch within 2 to 3 months. On the immigration, under the workforce development mandate, funding has been secured from the province and ACOA for a 1-year funding to hire an immigration navigator, and that's very positive. That's expected to be posted first week of April and hire by mid-May. The STAR Regional Strategic Tourism Plan is moving along. It's done really, and the transition work is beginning very soon. And there's additional application for funding with ACOA on that. One of the big projects has been an agricultural technology accelerator program, and that is essentially done. But that's coming to the implementation. Actually, there was a significant event hosted on March 29th at Acadia University, and the turnout has been incredible. There's been a lot of participation in that, and so there's quotes now being received to facilitate the engagement strategy for transition and implementation team. And just on the status of the REN generally, and the IMSA group is probably more in the know than I am. I got a brief update, but there's been coming together there of the partners around the IMSA group. There was a difference in terms of the term period, 3 years versus 1, and that seems to be settling out, and there's some input to reconcile. But West Ants is back in, Wolfville is back in, and Annapolis County has been approaching the REN. They invited them into a workshop, and they want to talk again. So the REN is coming along. It's probably at its best point. It is at its best point since the implementation 8 or 10 years ago, whenever that was. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have lights, so we'll come back to questions on reports, if any, shortly. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Just one report, I guess. Landscape of Grand Pré met near the middle of March at some point. And we had to actually extend our meeting over a couple dates because there were so many things on the go, but I thought it was timely while we're talking about it tonight. On the map that was shown tonight, you could see where the visitor, like the point on Old Post Road where you can see the landscape, the UNESCO World Heritage Site. So we're entering into conversations with Parks Canada around an enhanced visitor experience concept. So I think it's a really interesting way to tell the story of the three cultures that converge at Grand Pré. And so there will be kind of some consultation and a lot more that will go into it before anything happens. But just that those conversations are taking place, and the Mi'kmaq, I think, have been approached to as well give input, and they'll be a partner, obviously, going forward. And then the other thing was that the board of the Landscape of Grand Pré approved a financial contribution to the extension of the Harvest Moon Trail from Grand Pré into Hortonville. And so they've agreed to be a partner in that work as well, which I think is very exciting. And then I have no library board has met, although we're meeting this month, and then the Trails meets on Thursday. So I'll have a trail report next week.
Thank you. You lost a member of the library board, the
yes,
deputy
and
mayor
thank
in
you.
Annapolis
Yeah,
Royal.
and I should publicly, I guess, acknowledge that deputy mayor of the town of Annapolis Royal passed away, Pat Power, who was a long-serving member of the Annapolis Valley Library Board. And the chair of the board, Janet Ness, informed us over the weekend, and I guess we send our condolences to the town of Annapolis Royal. And Deputy Mayor Power really touched a lot of people and volunteered. We were speaking about it earlier, with just an incredible amount of organizations, and was involved in so many things. So I know she certainly leaves. She'll be missed on the library board. She leaves a big hole, and we're not the only ones. She'll be missed in a number of different tables and in a number of different rooms. So many condolences to the entire community, really, of people who will be feeling her absence.
Thank you. And I'll advise council that today I took the liberty of sending a letter of condolence to the mayor and council of the town of Annapolis Royal, and I'll share that with you. Councillor Meisner.
Yes, sorry, I'm just looking at my notes and realized I forgot a couple things. So I just also wanted to mention that we are in the holy month of Ramadan, a month of fasting and celebration, and very important time to our Muslim community. It is a 30-day celebration that follows the lunar cycle, and it was expected to start in March and go until the moon cycle switches in April. So wanted to mention that is happening right now. An important time to take note for teachers who have Muslim students in their classrooms, that they may be tired or fatigued as they go through their celebrations, and as well with employees who may also be working as they fast. It is an important time for them. And then also Kentville Joint Fire Services met, a month ago. And membership is still holding steady. They've had some changes in staffing. They've lost their full-time mechanic and have janitorial staff, and are now outsourcing some of that to see how that will work out financially. They continue to work on upgrades to the building. They've sold off one surplus truck that they had, and are working kind of alongside of their partners if there is a need for, instead of having duplicate equipment, relying on equipment from other fire departments instead of having duplicate equipment sitting in their bays. They have a plan to rebuild one of their trucks that will lengthen its useful life. By the time that truck with the rebuild, by the time that that truck ages out, it will be over 20 years. But right now they're looking at a turnaround time for build of new trucks at least 5 years. And the prices are going up substantially every time that they check. So the rebuild is a great way to lengthen that equipment. And Chief Hamilton has also been able to have some movement, not very quickly and not very much movement, in terms of the Aldershot D&D contract has not been updated since the 80s, and he has worked very diligently to try to stay on top of that. So hopefully by the end of this year we will have a new contract in place, and I think that's everything.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Are there any further verbal reports? Any questions of any of the reporting councillors on their verbal reports? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion that the Municipal Council receive the board and committee reports as attached to the April 4th, 2023 Council agenda and as provided verbally. Moved by Councillor Meisner, seconded by Councillor Allen. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor or otherwise, please vote now.
Councillor Harding, yay.
Thank you, Councillor. That's passed unanimously. Thank you. Moving to item 10, could I have a motion to receive the 2 items of correspondence listed? Moved by Councillor Meisner, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Discussion? All those in favor or otherwise, please vote now. And while we're waiting for the results of the vote, we had 2 letters, one regarding the reference being Campground Scott's Bay, an issue that has not come before us yet, indeed hasn't left, as I understand it, hasn't left the planners' desks yet, but we do continue to receive correspondence. Secondly, for information, the Bowl for Kids' Sake endeavor is explained in the letter from them. The motion is passed unanimously if Councillor Windsor is voting in favor. Yes. He is. Thank you. Councillor Harding, you voted in favor, didn't you?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other business to come before the meeting this evening? Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to sort of bring something forward that was in discussion, not in this room, but based on the length of our public hearing this evening, I was wondering if we might be able to tap staff to see if there's another time when we may be able to do public hearings, to have them separate from our council meetings, especially when we have, say, more than 2, and the items may be of a lot of interest to the public when we know we're going to have a lot of people here to speak on them. It also would give council an opportunity to digest the information that comes from that public before it comes for second reading here in chambers. So I was just wondering if that was something. I know that in the past we had set aside the first Thursday of each month. I don't think we do it anymore, but we had at one time for a second committee of the whole meeting in case we needed it. So maybe that's an option, but maybe I'm asking if staff could have a look at that.
Thank you. My feel for the room was that there's some unanimity around that point, and so what I'd like is simply a show of hands of folks that feel that that should be looked into and reported back. That's unanimous. Thank you. I don't think it's necessary to put it on the record in the form of a motion. Staff will take that away. Councillor Windsor.
Just as a follow-up on something that has been on our agenda, but not quite on our agenda for some time. I know it's been in the public domain quite a bit. That is the property in Scotts Bay, the camping property. What status is that at now? I think there was a zoning change being proposed, and so where is that at? It's kind of...
An application for a development permit has been received, but it has not left the planner's desks, to my knowledge, and it has not come before PAC for consideration.
Wasn't that a zoning application at one time?
I think it began as a zoning application, but it was switched to a development agreement
So how does that change? Like
nothing in terms of public, nothing in terms of results or public hearings or information, other than it enables us to somewhat restrict the parameters of the development if we do it by development agreement rather than rezone an entire parcel of land.
Okay, I just wonder how a thing like how it changes from a zoning application to a...
Well, it's the applicant. It's still in the planner's offices. It's not
okay.
Not before us. Okay. Any other business to come before the meeting? There are no comments. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, comments from the public. Thank you for staying. I really should have noticed.
Hi, I'm Mary Dontremont again. You guys, I think, are all great and do a really good job. I really appreciate every time I've ever spoken to any of the councillors or the MLAs. They've always been so very helpful. I've got the development property that you guys just approved down there in Greenwood, behind the mall. I'm a new developer, and I found it a really difficult process. You know, I'm just a property that I bought with my son from my father's estate, and it was, you know, thinking that we were going to do the best amount of planning ahead of it, and we went through a lot of process with it, and went through all the guidelines and got all the plot plans and all that, and you know, contacted the powers to be, and they said all you have to do is put in an application, and I don't know, it was $300, $900, and it was like a year and a half ago, and they said it would take anywhere from 3 to 6 months depending, and I was okay, it was fine. But for me, the way it ended up happening, they'd say, okay, yeah, we got your application. And then I would contact them several times without response, and to the point of almost harassing these poor people that worked in your planning department. And then finally one of them would say to me, oh, but you missed this section. So, okay, so fine, I go back and do this section. Anyways, this goalpost for me kept changing and changing, and the expenses accumulated, and when we got to the end where I had to do the wetland delineation, which I'd like you to realize was phase 1. There's actually 2 delineations that you do. There's the step 1 where they come in and they do a walk around and analyze it, and then there's the second one, which is very thorough. The first one costs $7,000, and the second one costs about $20,000. And so, you know, between engineering plans and things like that, it accumulates quite a cost. And the frustration developing this property was that even now that we're at this point where you guys have approved it, and even though I feel like I was coerced into accepting a lesser zoning with my other one, even though I had the right as the developer with the size of land to make a remediation of that wetlands, and with the first wetland delineation, knowing that there was a huge buffer zone, and you know that it hadn't been really established exactly where the wetlands were, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, I digress. I would like to see, as a first-time developer, that there was some kind of accountability, some guidance through the process, and also even some more direction from the planning and understanding what exactly that they're looking for. You know, my understanding is affordable housing is the most important thing that we're looking for right now. I actually just this week had an application finally go through for a 2-bedroom apartment on a commercial building that I have vacant in Kingston. They came out to look at their property, inspect it, which I guess is not normal, and I'm not really sure what that was necessary, but they did. And because it was an
I'm
older
sorry,
building.
when you say they, who are you referring to?
The planning. It was
Our
yeah.
folks? Yeah, okay.
Yep. No, I'm not going to go into naming names or anything like that, but I'm just saying they came out to do an inspection after they had the application for me to put the apartment in, and they came out and they decided that because it was crawl space, that I would have to do blown-in insulation underneath the crawl space, which is almost an impossible task considering how the building was built. And so between myself and the contractor that I had hired, had decided that that's going to be about $30,000 to do a, 20 by 25 foot space of this expensive stuff. And so therefore that apartment's not going to be built. And there was no mediation for me to, or even for the contractor, to be able to go to the planning people and say, okay, I understand these are your rules, but why can't I, as a common sense person, have somebody else that can say, okay, well, we really need these apartments, and we really need these sites put up for these mini homes coming in. We have, directly developing for small young families coming in with lesser income than being able to afford a house, and all of these things that I'm trying to do. And I realize most of you don't know me, but I felt like there was no other avenue, and I almost felt like the planning department and the Department of Highways were literally blocking me from moving forward. And I know, like I said, everyone that I've ever talked to that was a counselor or an MLA or anything like that has been exceedingly helpful. And I know that you guys are like kind of in the same place where you can't do anything about it. I just wanted to express it because I can tell you right now, if I have another property that I can develop, or if I get the chance that I maybe want to develop that other back half, probably I won't. My heart went out to these people that were talking about trying to get a development agreement for 2.5 years, and nothing comes of it. When I'm listening to you and you're telling me there's a campground that's going to get put in, and they're stuck in planning, and that's been my life for the last 1.5 years. I've been stuck in planning. So I just wanted to express that. I don't know if anybody can do anything about that in the long run, but it's certainly what's affecting the ability to make affordable housing for a lot of people, a lot of developers. I'm not a big wig, like some of the other guys can go in and they're pumping them out. I don't know how they do it, I really don't. But it would be great if there was somebody around that could mediate that stuff between the planning department and the developers when we fetch up in these kind of situations. Just a thought.
Thank you for your comments.
You're welcome.
We need input on this type of thing. We need to know the experience of folks in your position, and if we hear the message, then we start to ask questions and see where the roadblocks are and how they can be streamlined, and so you're not wasting your breath.
Thank you.
And we do appreciate your comments.
Thank
now, I think I detected in there's a crossover, and I'm not making excuses for anybody, but there is a crossover between building inspection and fire inspection, and these folks are applying national building codes that are beyond our control, that have certain requirements. So I don't know whether any of that affected your situation. It doesn't matter. Your message has been received, and we appreciate you coming.
I will add just one more thing, and maybe that it's not a common sense way to look at it. But I do feel like in the planning departments and the Department of Highways guys and things like that, that if maybe the developers weren't so known to them on such a regular basis, or if there was some kind of recycle of the people, or if there was someone, oh, I know that guy, he's the brother of my whatever, or he's my neighbor who ripped me off 2 years ago, or whatever. If there's, I would think that if a planning, I don't know if they call them officers or whatever, comes in and they know you in any personal way, I think that they should have to step back and not be involved in that development. So there's absolutely no prejudice going forward also. I think that that's a factor to agree, or at least it's been alluded from other developers that they feel that that might be contributing to some of the reasons why some people get to go ahead of other people. And you know, I can't say that for sure, but that's just my surmise.
Speaking from my experience, I've only been here about 10 years. That has not been my experience. I believe our staff has much more integrity than that.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you making the comment, because I know those types of rumors.
Yes, it was very much
okay.
Through that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
There's no further comment from the public. We're moving to a closed session. Well, it's on the agenda. And it's not my fault, it's Mr. Quinn's fault. So I'm asking, we don't anticipate having a motion to come back into general session, do we? No. So I'm asking for a motion to adjourn council and move into a closed session with no intention to return. Moved by Councillor Killam, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion? No discussion on a motion to adjourn. All those in favor or otherwise, please vote now.
Councillor Harding, yay.
Thank you.
Councillor Harding better clear his hotel room. Take all his friends out so they don't hear our...
If Councillor Windsor was voting in favor, then we'd be unanimous, and he is. So that's we are adjourned, and we are in now as soon as...